Greetings, Loremasters. Tonight, our chronicle covers a subject near and dear to the hearts of many, yet frustratingly hollow for those who stop to look a little closer. We are returning to the windswept tundra of the holds, to the clattering cobblestones of the trade districts, and specifically to the grand, smoky mead hall that sits atop the hill like a capsized memory of a forgotten age. We are talking about the companions, but we aren't here to sing their praises. We are here to dissect why, perhaps, they aren't quite the heroes we were promised. The air in Whiterun is crisp tonight, carrying the scent of snowberries and the distant metallic tang of the Skyforge. You can almost hear the guards complaining about their patrol duties as the moons rise high over the throat of the world. It's a beautiful setting for a disappointment. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to Cold Harbour without some serious enchanted gear, and you certainly wouldn't want to face the perils of Skyrim with nothing but a rusty iron sword and a misguided sense of loyalty. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you are in the world right now and what time is on your clock. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Dragonborn stands before the great doors of Jorrvaskr. It is an imposing structure, older than the city that surrounds it. In fact, as many of you seasoned travellers know, the city of Whiterun was actually built around the mead hall, not the other way around. The hall itself is made from the hull of the river ship that carried the original 500 companions from Atmora, flipped upside down to serve as a roof. It's a romantic image, a literal vessel of history sheltering the current generation of warriors. You push open the heavy oak doors, expecting to find the pinnacle of Nordic honour, a council of wise knights discussing the defence of the realm or the hunting of dragons. Instead, you are greeted by the smell of wet fur, stale ale, and a fistfight. Two grown men, Athis and Jarda Stonearm, are pummeling each other in the middle of the dining area while the rest of the Honourable Guild cheers them on. It sets a tone, doesn't it? It tells you immediately that for all their talk of Ysgramor's legacy and the glory of the Atmorans, the modern companions are essentially a frat house with sharp weapons. Our journey into wasted time begins right here, with the recruitment process and the very first tasks assigned to a budding hero. You approach Kodlak Whitemane, the Harbinger. He sits in his corner, eyes cloudy with age and regret, peeling an apple or staring into the fire. He seems wise enough, carrying the weight of leadership with a gentle, grandfatherly grace. He agrees to let you test your mettle, but the moment you step out into the courtyard to cross swords with Vilkas, the cracks in the facade begin to show. Vilkas, the Master of Arms, treats you with a disdain usually reserved for mudcrabs. He demands you hit him, but not too hard. It's a strange dance. If you use magic, the very fabric of the universe shaped by your will, he scolds you. We don't use magic here, he sneers. It's an arbitrary limitation that immediately alienates any adventurer who has spent time studying at the College of Winterhold. It's the first red flag that this guild is stuck in the past, clinging to a brute force methodology that ignores the tactical realities of a world filled with fire-breathing lizards and necromancers. But let's assume you pass this rudimentary test. You hand over a sword to be sharpened, errand boy duty number 1, and then you are directed to Farkas for your first real assignment. This is where the illusion of honour shatters completely. You are the Dragonborn. You have the soul of a dragon. You can shout the clouds away. And Farkas, with his heavy brow and simple grin, looks at you and says, "Someone has caused trouble in the city. Go talk to them." This is the radiant quest known as Hired Muscle. It sounds tough, doesn't it? Like you're about to enforce the law or protect the innocent. But when you look at the quest marker, it doesn't point to a bandit leader or a necromancer hiding in a cave. It points to a citizen. Often, it points to a shopkeeper. Perhaps it is Belethor, the sleazy Breton who would sell his own sister. Or maybe it's Arcadia, the alchemist who thinks you have ataxia. Sometimes the random number generator of fate is particularly cruel, and you are sent to intimidate someone harmless, like a priestess of Kinnereth, or a local bard whose only crime is playing the lute badly. The objective is simple: brawl, intimidate, break their spirit, picture the scene. The Dragonborn, clad in steel plate, walks into the general goods store. The bell above the door jingles cheerfully. Belethor looks up, expecting a customer, perhaps ready to offer a deal on some driftwood. Instead, the new pledge of the legendary companions cracks their knuckles and starts swinging. There is no honour in this. It is extortion. It is the tactic of a street gang, not a legendary order of warriors. You are effectively the mafia enforcer for whomever paid the companions a handful of septims to settle a petty grudge. The mechanics of the brawl are visceral and messy. In Skyrim, a fistfight is a clumsy affair. The camera shakes with every impact. The sound design is filled with wet thuds and grunts of pain. You corner the poor merchant against their counter, knocking over baskets of cabbage and wheels of cheese. They cower, they plead, but the quest log demands violence. You punch them until they drop to one knee, gasping for breath, begging for mercy. And for what? 100 gold coins? The approval of a man who admits he has trouble thinking when the moon is full? It is a jarring disconnect from the lore the companions wrap themselves in. They speak of the 500 companions who swept across the land, conquering and claiming territory in the name of humanity. That history is bloody, yes, perhaps even genocidal, but it had a scope of grandeur. It was about survival and conquest. The modern iteration has reduced that grand ambition to beating up Mikhail in the bannered mare because he looked at someone the wrong way. There is an obscure bit of lore found in the book Great Harbingers that mentions a man named Kyrnil Longnose. He is credited with founding the Circle after a period where the companions had lost their way and were composed of dishonourable mercenaries. It implies that the companions have a cyclical history of falling into disgrace. Looking at the current state of affairs, where the new recruit's initiation involves assaulting a greengrocer, one has to wonder if we aren't deep in another one of those troughs. The honour they preach is merely a coat of paint over a business model that is indistinguishable from the thugs lurking in the ratway of Riften. The only difference is that the Thieves' Guild is honest about being criminals. The companions pretend it's tradition. This hypocrisy is woven into the very fabric of their daily lives. You wander through Jorrvaskr and hear them boasting. "I've never been one for book learning," they say proudly, as if ignorance is a stat boost. They mock the Jarl's guards, yet they do the dirty work that the guards are too lawful to perform. It raises a question that fans have debated on forums for over a decade. Are the companions actually a legal entity? Or does the Jarl simply tolerate them because they bring money into Whiterun and occasionally clear out a giant camp? There is a prevailing fan theory that Jarl Balgruuf, shrewd as he is, actually fears the companions. They are a private army living inside his walls, answering to no law but their own code, which we have established is flexible enough to allow for assault and battery. If the companions decided to take Whiterun, could the city guards stop them? Probably not. And so, the Jarl turns a blind eye when you break Nazim's nose, marking it down as guild business rather than assault. As you stand over your defeated target, watching them wipe blood from their lip, the game rewards you. Objective completed. You trudge back up the steps to Jorrvaskr, the wind biting at your face, feeling less like a hero and more like a bully. You report to Farkas. He grins, slapping you on the shoulder with a hand the size of a ham hock. "Good job," he says. "Here's your share." He tosses you a pouch of coins. It's a pittance, barely enough to cover the cost of a healing potion you might have needed if the merchant fought back with a dagger. This introduction to the guild sets the hook for the disappointment to follow. You realise that your time, the precious time of a hero destined to save the world from Alduin, is being spent settling bar tabs and petty rivalries. The glory of Ysgramor is currently preoccupied with making sure the local alchemist pays her protection money. It is a mundane, gritty, and frankly depressing start to what should be a high fantasy adventure, and the atmosphere in the hall doesn't help. While you were out shaking down the locals, the rest of the companions were doing what exactly? Eating bread, drinking mead, complaining about the grey manes. There is a stagnancy to Jorrvaskr. For all their talk of fighting and hunting, you rarely see them leave the hall unless they are scripted to die or follow you. They are furniture in their own legend, waiting for you to wind them up and set them in motion. The visual storytelling in Jorrvaskr reinforces this. The main hall is dark, lit by the roaring fire pit in the centre. Long tables are littered with food scraps and tankards. It feels cosy, yes, in that specific Skyrim way where the firelight dances on the wooden beams. But it also feels closed off. The windows are high and small. The world outside, the civil war, the return of the dragons, the vampires rising, feels a million miles away. Inside, the only thing that matters is who can drink the most mead and who has the strongest arm. It is an echo chamber of toxic masculinity and faded glory, preserved in amber, or perhaps tree sap, within the hull of a dead ship. Even the architecture hints at this inversion. A ship is meant to travel, to explore, to move. Jorrvaskr is a ship turned upside down, grounded, immobile. It has become a roof, a shelter, a place to hide rather than a vehicle for adventure. It represents the current state of the guild perfectly, stationary, inverted, and looking backward at where they came from rather than forward to where they are going. As you pocket your blood money and look around the hall, you might catch the eye of Skjor or Aela. They watch you with a secretive intensity. They know there is more to the guild than shaking down merchants. They are hinting at the inner circle, the great secret that binds them together. You think, here it comes, the real quest, the magic, the honour. You hope that the intimidation tactics were just a test of obedience, a filter to weed out the weak before the true noble work begins. But as we will soon see, the secrets they hide are not ones of higher purpose or divine calling. They are secrets of blood and stench, trading one form of thuggery for another, more primal kind. But for now, you are just the new whelp, the hired muscle, the Dragonborn reduced to a debt collector, standing in a room full of people who think beating up a shopkeeper is the height of Nordic culture. The pouch of coins sits heavy in your hand, a tangible representation of the companion's current standing in the world. It isn't a king's ransom, and it certainly isn't the spoils of war that Ysgramor likely envisioned when he first drove the prow of his ship onto the icy shores of Sarek Head. It's a wage, a salary. You have just performed a transaction, trading violence for currency, which brings us to the second major crack in the guild's foundation, the staggering hypocrisy of their so-called morality. If you listen to the idle chatter in Jorrvaskr, you will hear the word honour thrown around like a sweet roll at a harvest festival. They speak of the glory of battle, the bond of the shield siblings, and the purity of their martial prowess. They turn their noses up at the Thieves' Guild for stealing, and at the Dark Brotherhood for murder, positioning themselves as the moral high ground of Skyrim's underground economies. But let's strip away the romantic poetry and look at the ledger. The companions are mercenaries. They are soldiers of fortune who have simply branded themselves better than the average sellsword sitting in a tavern. When you ask for work, you aren't assigned a mission based on moral necessity. You aren't told, the village of Rorikstead is under siege, we must defend the innocent. No, you're told that Jarl so-and-so has a problem with a beast, or a wealthy citizen needs an item recovered. The motivation is purely transactional. If the client didn't have the coin, the companions wouldn't be unsheathing their steel. This creates a dissonance that is hard to ignore once you notice it. They claim to be independent, answering to no political leader, a point they stress regarding their neutrality in the Civil War. Yet, they are entirely dependent on the whims of whoever has a heavy purse. This neutrality in the Civil War is a frequent topic of debate among the fan community. Some argue it's a noble stance, proving their dedication to Skyrim as a whole rather than a specific Jarl. Others, perhaps the more cynical among us, point out that neutrality is just good business. If you pick a side, you alienate half your customer base. By sitting on the fence, the companions can take contracts from Stormcloak sympathizers in Windhelm and Imperial loyalists in Solitude without blinking an eye. It's not political principle, it's market maximization. While the rest of the province bleeds for the future of the North, the legendary warriors are content to sit in their mead hall and wait for the highest bidder to ask for a pest control service. Consider the family heirloom quests. Skjor or Vilkas will tell you that a thief has stolen something precious from a client. You are sent to retrieve it. The thief is usually a bandit leader or a Folmer warlord, and the item is often randomized to the point of absurdity. You might be sent into the deepest, most trap-infested Dwemer ruin to retrieve an iron dagger of sparks or a simple gold ring. The effort required to retrieve the item vastly outweighs its value, but you do it because the contract dictates it. And what of the target? The companions don't seem to care who you kill to get the job done. While they claim to forbid killing innocent civilians, unless of course it's part of an intimidation job gone wrong, which they tend to forgive rather quickly if you pay a fine, they have no qualms about you slaughtering entire camps of bandits who might just be starving outcasts. The distinction between monster and target is blurry. To a companion, if a contract is on your head, you are no longer a person, you are an objective. There is an obscure piece of lore found in the Pocket Guide to the Empire. first edition that describes the companions of that era as accepting members from all races, provided they had the heart of a warrior. Yet, in the game, we see a roster that is overwhelmingly Nord, with a token Dark Elf, Athis, who is treated as the runt of the litter, and a lone Imperial, Rhea, who tries too hard to fit in. The modern companions preach the inclusivity of the warrior spirit, but the reality of Jorrvaskr feels deeply insular, almost xenophobic in its passive-aggressive way. They are a Nords club that tolerates outsiders only as long as they are useful and profitable. This mercenary nature cheapens the legacy of Ysgramor. The 500 companions were conquerors. They carved out a kingdom for humanity in a land dominated by elves. It was a brutal, bloody campaign, yes, but it had a purpose beyond profit. It was about survival and establishing a home. The current crop of companions has reduced that grand historical narrative to a gig economy. Ysgramor wielded Wuuthrad to drive back the snow elves. You wield a Skyforged steel sword to get a merchant's necklace back from a cave bear. The scale has not just shrunk, it has collapsed. Imagine the courier running up to you in the middle of a dungeon. "I've got a letter for you," he pants. "It's from the Jarl of Winterhold. He needs you to kill a giant that's been wandering too close to the road. The pay? 300 gold. You look at your inventory, currently stuffed with ebony armor and enchanted jewelry worth thousands, and you have to laugh." The economic model of the companions makes no sense for a high-level Dragonborn. You're essentially a demigod doing chores for pocket change. It's like hiring a nuclear physicist to fix your toaster. The rescue mission quests highlight this absurdity further. You are sent to rescue a kidnapped citizen. A noble cause, surely. But who is the victim? Often it's a randomly generated NPC with no connection to anything. Rescue kidnapped citizen from Cragslane Cavern. You go, you slaughter the bandits, you free the prisoner. They say, "Thank you, I'll never forget this," and run off. You return to Jorrvaskr, get your gold, and the event is never spoken of again. There is no lasting impact. The companions don't build alliances or make the roads safer in a permanent way. They just put out fires for cash. It creates a feeling of running on a hamster wheel. You are the realm's most overqualified exterminator, and the Harbinger nods sagely as if this endless loop of radiant quests is the path to Sovngarde. And let's talk about the gear. Yorlan Greymane works the Skyforge, arguably the best smithy in Skyrim. He talks a big game about the steel. "Gods be praised," he grunts. The Skyforged steel weapons are decent in the early game, sure. They are lighter and sharper than standard steel. But very quickly, as you explore the world, you find Dwarven, Orcish, Ebony, and Daedric weaponry. The legendary steel of the companions becomes obsolete before you even finish their quest line. Yet the guild acts as though holding a Skyforged sword is the ultimate privilege. It's another layer of the delusion. They believe they are the apex predators of Skyrim, armed with the best steel, while the Dragonborn is standing there in full dragonplate armor, holding a mace made from the soul of a Daedric prince, nodding politely. The leadership knows this too. Kodlak, for all his wisdom, seems tired of the mercenary life. He senses the rot. He writes in his journal, which we will pry into later, about the drift away from honour. He knows that the glory of the dead has become the profit of the living, but he does nothing to stop it. He presides over a hall where the height of ambition is the next contract. The shield siblings will fight and die for you, they say, but really, they are fighting for their share of the take. It creates a strange dissonance in the player's mind. You want to believe in the myth. You want to believe that by joining the circle, you are becoming part of an ancient lineage of protectors. But every time you return to the hall, the reality sets in. You see Torvar drunkenly stumbling around the sleeping quarters. You see Njada Stonearm criticising your technique, despite the fact that you just killed a dragon on the front porch. You realise that this isn't King Arthur's Round Table. It's a localised temp agency for violence. As you complete these early tasks, proving your reliability as a hired blade, the inner circle begins to take notice. Not because you are the Dragonborn and not because you have a destiny, but because you are efficient. You bring in the gold. You clear the backlog of requests. You are a good earner. And that, more than any code of honour, is what earns you an invitation to their secret meetings. But the secret they are guarding isn't about honour, or money, or even history. It's about power. A dirty, visceral, flea-bitten kind of power that they have mistaken for a blessing. You think you are climbing the corporate ladder of a warrior's guild, but you are actually stepping into a trap set centuries ago by a Daedric prince who thinks of mortals as nothing more than prey. The hypocrisy of their mercenary morality is bad enough, but it pales in comparison to the smell that awaits you in the Underforge. So you've proven yourself as a reliable thug. You've beaten up the local bard, rescued a kidnapped citizen from a damp cave, and perhaps slain a bear that wandered too close to a farmstead. You've accepted the coin, swallowed the hypocrisy, and continued to nod along while Vilkas lectures you about the warrior's heart. Now the inner circle decides you're ready for the truth. They invite you to the Underforge at night. The name alone sounds impressive. A secret forge beneath the Skyforge, hidden by a stone door that grinds open only for the chosen. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation. You expect to be knighted, or perhaps given a weapon of legend forged in the fires of the ancestors. You step into the cavern, the air cool and damp, smelling of wet stone, and something else, something musky, something distinctively animal. You see Skjor and Aela waiting for you. Aela, fierce and painted, holds a basin. Skjor, stern and bald, looks at you with the seriousness of a man about to reveal the meaning of life. And then a werewolf walks in. It's not a metaphor. It's not a spirit animal. It is a literal hairy, hulking werewolf. It's Aela, or maybe Skjor. It's hard to tell when they're covered in fur and drooling, but the reveal is meant to be shocking. "We are werewolves," they effectively say. "This is our great secret. This is our power." This brings us to the third and perhaps most visceral disappointment, the beast blood's smelly reality. The game tries very hard to frame lycanthropy as a tempting dark gift, a power that makes you faster, stronger, a true apex predator. But let's look at the practical reality of being a werewolf in Skyrim. First, there's the smell. In-game dialogue frequently references the wet dog smell coming from the companions. Guards will comment on it as you pass. "Is that fur coming out of your ears?" They sniff the air distastefully. You have effectively become the stinky kid in class. No amount of bathing in the White River is going to wash that off. You are a walking, talking kennel. For a warrior who relies on stealth or social grace, this is a nightmare. Imagine trying to negotiate a peace treaty at High Hrothgar while smelling like you just rolled in a carcass. Then there is the transformation itself. It is violent, painful, and messy. Your bones crack, your skin stretches, your armour. Where does your armour go, by the way? It vanishes into the ether, only to reappear when you turn back. That's a gameplay convenience we all accept, but lore-wise you are tearing out of your clothes. It's undignified. And once you are in beast form, you lose access to your inventory. No healing potions, no enchanted swords, no map. You're reduced to swiping your claws and sprinting around on all fours. The tactical advantage is questionable at best. In the early game, sure, turning into a werewolf can save your skin against a tough bandit chief. You can ragdoll enemies, sending them flying with a power attack. It's satisfying in a chaotic, button-mashing sort of way. But as you level up, the beast form scales poorly. Your armour rating in beast form is negligible compared to a well-smithed set of Daedric plate. You can't use magic to heal or buff yourself. You're a large, furry target with a massive hitbox. Archers and mages will tear you apart before you can close the distance. Lore-wise, the blessing is even more dubious. It originates from a pact made by the Circle with the witches of the Glenmoral Coven, who serve Hircine, the Daedric prince of the Hunt. The companions traded their humanity, and their afterlives, which we will get to, for power. But it's a power that controls them as much as they control it. Aela and Skjor claim they have mastered the beast, that they can control the transformation. But can they? Vilkas admits that his mind feels clouded. Farkas is terrified of giant spiders, a fear that seems incongruous with a fearless beast, unless the beast brain is simpler, more instinctual, and thus more prone to primal panic. Even Kodlak, the wisest of them, describes the beast as a separate entity within him, constantly clawing to get out. It's a parasitic relationship. You aren't gaining a superpower, you're accepting a tenant in your soul that wants to eat your neighbours. There is an obscure tidbit in the book Lycanthropy, Legend or Disease, which suggests that some werewolves lose their minds entirely over time, becoming feral beasts permanently. The companions seem to think they are immune to this because of their willpower, but the risk is always there. Every time they transform, they are rolling the dice on their own sanity. And for what? To be able to run faster across the tundra, You can buy a horse for 1,000 gold that doesn't smell like mildew and murder. Fan debates often centre on the utility of the werewolf form versus the vampire lord form introduced in the Dawnguard DLC. The consensus usually leans toward vampires having the superior toolkit: magic, teleportation, better scaling. The werewolf is a blunt instrument. It's pure melee aggression with no nuance. It fits the companion's theme of hit it until it stops moving, but for a Dragonborn who has mastered shouts and spells, it feels like a regression. You are devolving, and let's not forget the social consequences. If anyone sees you transform, you incur a massive bounty. 1,000 gold instantly. The entire hold turns hostile. You can't just explain, "Sorry officer, it's a guild thing." You are a monster to them. This forces you to use the power only in seclusion, or to wipe out all witnesses, which again pushes you toward that murder hobo playstyle that contradicts the honourable protector image. The initiation ritual in the Underforge is a gory affair. You have to drink the blood of a werewolf. Specifically, Aela cuts her arm and pours her blood into the basin. You lap it up. It's grotesque. In a world of refined restoration magic and divine blessings, you are engaging in blood magic that would make a necromancer blush. The screen blurs, your heartbeat thumps in your ears, and you black out, waking up in the middle of Whiterun, likely having killed something or someone in your fugue state. The game usually spares you the guilt by having you wake up near a dead bandit or animal, but the implication is clear: you lost control. This loss of control is the antithesis of what a warrior strives for. Discipline, focus, mastery. These are the hallmarks of a great fighter. The Beastblood throws all that out the window in exchange for bloodlust. It turns you into a berserker who can't tell friend from foe. In the chaos of a civil war battle or a dragon fight, being a werewolf is a liability. You can't shout at a dragon to force it to land if you're barking at it. Aela the Huntress is the primary advocate for this life. She revels in it. She talks about the thrill of the hunt, the feeling of the wind in her fur. To her, this is the pinnacle of existence. She represents the primal, chaotic side of nature, but she is short-sighted. She sees the immediate rush of power but ignores the long-term cost. She's like an addict who claims they can quit any time, yet her entire identity is wrapped up in the drug. For the player, the novelty wears off quickly. Once you've sprinted across the plains of Whiterun and mauled a few giants, the limitations set in. The inability to loot bodies while in beast form is a particularly annoying gameism that breaks the flow. You have to wait for the transformation to wear off, standing around naked in the snow just to check if that bandit had any gold. It turns the gameplay loop into a chore. Transform, kill, wait, dress, loot, repeat. Furthermore, the sleep mechanic is broken. Werewolves don't get the well-rested bonus. Their sleep is restless, plagued by the call of the hunt. This is a direct statistical penalty. You lose out on the experience gain bonus that normal adventurers get from a good night's sleep. The game is mechanically telling you, this is unhealthy. You're not resting, you're merely waiting for the next bout of violence. So you stand there in the Underforge, wiping Aela's blood from your mouth, the musk of the beast filling your nostrils. Skjor looks at you with pride, welcoming you to the pack. You have joined the inner circle, you're now a werewolf. But as the initial adrenaline fades, and you realise you can no longer get a good night's sleep and the guards are looking at you funny, you have to ask yourself, was it worth it? Is this the legendary power of the companions? To become a wet, smelly dog that can't use a doorknob? It is a harsh reality check. The great secret of the companions is that they are cursed, and they have just tricked you into sharing that curse, framing it as a promotion. But the physical inconveniences of being a werewolf are nothing compared to the spiritual price tag attached to it. Because when a companion dies, their soul doesn't go to the glorious halls of Sovngarde to drink with Ysgramor. It goes somewhere much, much worse. If the smell of wet dog and the inability to get a good night's sleep weren't deal breakers, the metaphysical fine print of the contract certainly should be. We need to talk about the afterlife. For a Nord, the afterlife isn't just a vague hope, it is a tangible destination. It is Sovngarde, the Hall of Valor, a place where the mead flows endlessly, the roast ox is always tender, and you can arm wrestle Ysgramor himself while a choir of heroes sings your praises. It is the ultimate retirement plan for the warrior culture of Skyrim. Every Nord grows up dreaming of this place. They fight with a smile on their lips because they know that a glorious death is merely the ticket to the VIP lounge. But for the inner circle of the companions, the ticket has been cancelled. The flight to Sovngarde has been rerouted to a much darker, damper destination, Hircine's hunting grounds. This is the tragic irony at the heart of the guild. The companions claim to be the spiritual successors of Ysgramor, the ultimate nords. Yet, by accepting the beast blood, they have contractually obligated themselves to spend eternity in a realm that is the antithesis of Nordic peace. Hircine, the Daedric Prince of the Hunt, is a possessive deity. He doesn't care about your honour or your lineage, he cares about the chase. When a werewolf dies, their soul is claimed by him. There is no debate, no tribunal, no weighing of the heart. You belong to the prince. So, what are the hunting grounds? Imagine a dense, endless forest shrouded in perpetual twilight. The air is thick with the scent of fear and blood. Strange, unearthly beasts roam the undergrowth. And you are there to hunt. Forever. That sounds okay, Aela might argue. I love hunting. Sure, Aela. You love hunting for a weekend. You love hunting when you can go back to Jorrvaskr, warm your feet by the fire and brag about the kill. But in the hunting grounds, the hunt never ends. There is no respite. There is no mead hall to return to. You run, you kill, you eat, and you do it again and again, for eternity. Furthermore, obscure lore suggests it isn't always clear who is the hunter and who is the prey. The Doors of Oblivion, a dense text you can find on dusty shelves in the Arcaneum, hints that Hircine's realm is a place of constant struggle. The glory of the hunt dissolves when you realise you're just a pawn in a Daedric prince's infinite game. You are part of the ecosystem, stock for his amusement. It's not a paradise, it's a hamster wheel made of antlers and gore. Kodlak Whitemane knows this. This is the shadow that hangs over his entire character arc. He's an old man who has spent his life fighting with honour, leading the guild with wisdom, only to realise that his soul is damned. He has a dream, a terrifying vision where he sees the previous Harbingers. He tries to reach them, to join them in Sovngarde, but he is pulled away by a great wolf. He sees his predecessors not as glorious heroes, feasting in the halls of Skjor, but as desperate feral beasts roaming Hircine's domain, lost to their own humanity. This is the core tragedy. The great Harbingers of the last few centuries, the men and women whose names are carved into the walls of Jorrvaskr, are not in Sovngarde. They are running naked through a Daedric forest, chasing spirit rabbits. Terfig, the Harbinger who first made the pact with the Glenmoril witches, essentially sold the entire leadership of the guild into slavery for a stat boost. It is a betrayal of the highest order, yet Skjor and Aela treat it like a family heirloom. Fans often debate the theological implications for the Dragonborn specifically. You have the soul of a dragon. You're claimed by Akatosh. If you become a werewolf, does Hircine get you? Or does Akatosh pull rank? It's a cosmic custody battle. Some theorise that the Dragonborn is too powerful to be claimed by any single prince, effectively becoming a free agent who can flip off Hircine at the pearly gates. But for the average companion, for Farkas, for Vilkas, there is no such loophole. They are doomed, and consider the cultural betrayal. The companions are supposed to be the guardians of Nord tradition. Sovngarde is the cornerstone of that tradition. By rejecting Sovngarde, they are rejecting the very essence of what it means to be a Nord hero. They have become a Daedric cult in all but name, worshipping a prince who treats mortals like game animals. They are closer in spirit to the Reachmen, the forsworn they so despise, than to the true sons and daughters of Skyrim. The game presents this conflict in a surprisingly subtle way. You see the fear in Kodlak's eyes, but you also see the stubborn arrogance in Aela's. She calls it embracing the beast. She views the afterlife in the hunting grounds as a natural extension of her life. But Aela is young. She hasn't felt the weight of age, the creaking of bones, the desire for rest. She assumes she will always want to run and kill. It is the folly of youth projected onto eternity. There is also the matter of the Glenmoril witches themselves. They are the brokers of this deal. Hideous hag-raven creatures living in a cave filled with troll fat and briar hearts. These are the entities the companions did business with. Not a priest of Talos, not a wise greybeard, but a coven of witches who serve a Daedric prince. It's a dirty deal made in a dirty place. The purity of the companions is a lie. Their power comes from the same dark corners of the world as the necromancers they claim to hate. When you really think about it, the hunting grounds is a horrifying concept for a guild based on brotherhood. In Sovngarde, You're reunited with your ancestors and friends. In the hunting grounds, are you? Or are you just another wolf in the pack? Do you recognise your shield brothers when you're both feral beasts tearing at the throat of a spirit bear? The lore implies a loss of self, a subsuming into the animal nature. The camaraderie of Jorrvaskr, the toasts, the songs, all of that is erased. There is only the scent, the chase, the kill. For a player who roleplays a devout Nord, this revelation effectively ruins the faction. You join expecting to follow in Ysgramor's footsteps, and halfway through you find out you've joined a suicide cult that worships a hunting demon. It's a bait and switch. You signed up for Valhalla, you got a one-way ticket to an unending survival game, and yet the game allows you to casually overlook this. You can run around as a werewolf slaughtering bandits, and never really confront the horror of what awaits you until the very end of the questline. Even then, the choice to cure yourself is presented as a personal preference rather than a spiritual emergency. Oh, you don't want to spend eternity as a wolf? That's cool, I guess. It underplays the sheer existential dread that should be permeating the circle. So we have a guild of mercenaries who bully shopkeepers, smell like wet dogs, and have sold their immortal souls to a Daedric prince for the ability to hit things slightly harder. It's a grim picture, but surely the individual members of the companions, the famous shield brothers and sisters, redeem the organisation with their competence and charm. Surely fighting alongside them is a tactical joy. Well, as we turn our attention to the actual experience of working with these elite warriors, you might want to lower your expectations even further. Because next, we have to talk about babysitting. Specifically, the ordeal of guiding a man named Farkas through a dungeon that a novice adventurer could clear with a wooden sword. The ink on your contract with the companions is barely dry, and the stench of the Underforge is still fresh in your memory when you are handed your next honour. You're to be tested again, or perhaps you are the test for someone else. The quest is Proving Honour, a name that drips with irony considering the events that unfold. Your task is to retrieve a fragment of Wuuthrad, the legendary axe of Ysgramor, from a place called Dustman's Cairn, and you will not be going alone. You will be accompanied by Farkas. Farkas, the man whose name literally means wolf in Hungarian, a linguistic Easter egg that lands with the subtlety of a warhammer. He is one of the twin brothers of the Circle, a formidable warrior with shoulders like boulders and a jawline you could strike a match on. Skjor tells you that Farkas will be your shield brother for this mission, observing your valour and ensuring you don't embarrass the guild. In theory, this is great. You have a tank, a heavy hitter, a meat shield to soak up damage while you cast spells or fire arrows from the shadows. In practice, you are embarking on one of the most frustrating escort missions in the game's history. The trouble begins the moment you enter Dustman's Cairn. It's an ancient Nordic tomb, filled with the usual suspects, Draugr, spiders and traps. Farkas charges in with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever chasing a tennis ball. He has no concept of stealth. If you are playing a thief or an assassin build, say goodbye to your sneak attack bonuses. Farkas clanks around in his heavy steel armour, alerting every undead within a 3-mile radius. For the companions, he bellows, waking up a Draugr deathlord who is perfectly content to sleep for another 1,000 years. But his lack of subtlety is forgivable. He's a warrior after all. What is less forgivable is his staggering fragility. For a member of the elite inner circle, a man who supposedly has the blood of the beast flowing through his veins, Farkas spends an alarming amount of time on one knee, gasping for breath. He gets overwhelmed by Silverhand bandits who are, let's be honest, just bandits with fancy swords, with embarrassing frequency. You find yourself constantly saving him, intervening to peel enemies off him, effectively babysitting the man who's supposed to be evaluating you. Then comes the scripted event. You reach a small chamber with a lever. I'll pull the lever, you think. But no, Farkas warns you to be careful. You pull it, and a grate slams down, trapping you in a small cage. You are helpless, and then the Silverhand appear. They surround Farkas. "Now you die, dog," they shout. This is the big reveal. Farkas is surrounded. He looks at the bandits, then at you. He groans, his body contorts, and he transforms into a werewolf right there in the dungeon. It's meant to be a moment of awe. The beast unleashed. He tears through the bandits in seconds, his claws flashing, bodies flying. It's cinematic moment, undeniably cool on your first playthrough. He howls, the cage opens and he stands there panting back in human form. You Sore, he says, looking like a toddler caught with his hand in the cookie jar. But once the cutscene magic fades, reality sets back in. You continue through the dungeon, now knowing his secret. Does he stay in werewolf form to help you clear the rest of the ruin? No. He puts his armour back on and goes back to swinging his greatsword with the speed of a rusted gate. The ultimate power is reserved for cutscenes, apparently. For the rest of the dungeon, he's back to getting stuck on geometry and blocking doorways. Oh, the doorways. Skyrim's followers are notorious for their pathfinding issues, but Farkas seems to have a special talent for standing exactly where you need to walk. Narrow corridor. Farkas is there. Doorway to a boss room. Farkas is inspecting the lintel. You find yourself sprinting into him, trying to nudge his massive frame out of the way, while he stares at you with those empty, lovable eyes. What is it? He asks. Move, Farkas, just move, you scream at your monitor. There is a fan theory that Farkas is intentionally written to be simple. The other companions make subtle digs at his intelligence. Farkas is too kind for his own good, they say, which is Nord code for he's not the sharpest axe in the armoury. Some speculate this is a side effect of the beastblood, that it dulls the mind more in some than others. Others think he's just a classic gentle giant archetype. Regardless of the reason, his tactical acumen is non-existent. He will charge a mage while standing in a pool of oil that's on fire. He will attack a frost spider while he is poisoned and at 5% health. He requires constant supervision. Midway through the dungeon, you encounter the Silver Hand in force. These are the sworn enemies of the companions, werewolf hunters who have made it their life's mission to eradicate the beasts. Lore-wise, they should be terrifying zealots. In gameplay, they are remarkably squishy. Yet they seem to have Farkas's number. He takes massive damage from their silver weapons, a nice detail admitted. But it means you are constantly healing him, or reloading saves because he decided to tank 3 guys with silver greatswords simultaneously. And let's not forget the dialogue. Farkas is a man of few words, and he repeats them often. Shaw's bones, a handsome man in Falkreath. Wait, wrong NPC. Farkas mostly grunts or comments on the darkness. He has no unique insight into the history of Dustman's Cairn, no interesting lore to drop about the fragment you're retrieving. He's a silent, heavy, metallic burden. When you finally reach the burial chamber, you're greeted by waves of Draugr. It's a long, drawn-out fight. You are the Dragonborn, shouting, slashing, casting. Farkas is somewhere. Maybe he's fighting. Maybe he's stuck behind a pillar. When the dust settles, and you retrieve the fragment of Wuuthrad, he gives you the nod of approval. Good fighting, he says. The circle will hear of this. You walk back to Jorrvaskr, the fragment in your pack, feeling less like a proven warrior and more like a tired parent who just took a toddler through a haunted house. You presented the honour of the companions by doing 90% of the work while your supervisor got locked in a cage and then got tired. The Proving Honour quest highlights a critical flaw in the companions' design, the incompetence of the NPCs. The game tells you these are the greatest warriors in Skyrim. They are legends. Bards sing of them. But the game shows you AI routines that can barely navigate a spiral staircase. This dissonance breaks the immersion. If Farkas is one of the best they have, how has this guild survived for 5,000 years? Is the bar for legendary warrior in Skyrim just incredibly low? Perhaps that's the secret. Maybe the rest of Skyrim is just so incompetent that the companions look competent by comparison. Or maybe, just maybe, the legend is all marketing sustained by the Skyforge's reputation and the sheer terrifying reality of a werewolf rampage covering up their tactical blunders. Speaking of tactical blunders, if you thought babysitting Farkas was bad, wait until you examine the leadership style of his mentor and fellow circle member, Skjor. Because if Farkas is the brawn without brains, Skjor is the brains that decided to walk alone into a fortress full of werewolf hunters. After you have successfully dragged Farkas through the dusty corridors of Dustman's Cairn and returned the shard of Wuuthrad to Jorrvaskr, you might expect a moment of respite. Perhaps a commendation ceremony, or at least a horn of mead that doesn't taste like it was brewed in a boot. But the pacing of the Companion's questline is nothing if not relentless in its march toward mediocrity. You are summoned once again, this time by Skjor. Skjor is the stern face of the circle. With his shaved head, intense stare, and armour that seems to be permanently furrowed in disapproval, he projects an aura of tactical brilliance. He is the bad cop to Kodlak's good cop. While the Harbinger talks of honour and tradition, Skjor talks of strength and results. He is the one who inducted you into the werewolf cult, remember? He is the one who seemingly calls the shots when the old man isn't looking. You look at him and think, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He's a veteran. He's a predator. So when he whispers to you that he has found the headquarters of the Silver Hand, a fortress called Gallows Rock, and that he wants to strike now, you trust him. He tells you to meet him there under the cover of darkness. It sounds like a covert operation, a surgical strike. 2 elite werewolf warriors infiltrating the enemy stronghold to cut the head off the snake. It has all the makings of a classic Spec Ops mission, Skyrim style. But let's pause and analyse the tactical acumen of this plan. Skjor, one of the most senior members of the Companions, decides to attack the primary base of operations for an organisation dedicated to killing werewolves, and he decides to do this with a team of 2, one of whom, you, has been a werewolf for about 20 minutes and still hasn't figured out how to keep their pants on during a transformation. Furthermore, he tells you to meet him at the fort. He doesn't wait for you to travel together. He doesn't coordinate a pincer manoeuvre. He effectively says, I'm going to run ahead into the meat grinder. You catch up when you can. It is the strategic equivalent of a horror movie character hearing a noise in the basement and deciding to investigate without a flashlight. You trek to Gallows Rock. It's usually raining or snowing because the weather engine loves drama. You arrive at the fort to find the exterior guards already dead. Classic Skjor, you think. He's already started the party. You enter the ruin, expecting to find him back to back with Aela, fighting off waves of enemies, or perhaps stealthily slitting throats in the shadows. Instead, you fight your way through the dungeon alone. You cut through Silver Hand members who, despite being elite hunters, are wearing leather armour and wielding standard steel weapons. It's not a difficult dungeon, it's a standard run and gun. You encounter the werewolf hunters in their natural habitat, which mostly involves them standing around campfires boasting about how much they hate dogs. Finally, you reach the boss chamber. This is it, the showdown. You burst through the doors ready to save the day, and there, lying on the stone floor, is Skjor, dead. Not dying, not fighting for his life, just dead. He's crumpled in a heap, surrounded by a few dead Silver Hand and the leader of the pack, a generic boss named Krev the Skinner. Krev is not a named lore figure with a backstory. Krev is a randomly generated NPC who can be a different race and gender depending on your playthrough. Skjor, the tactical genius, the intimidating mentor, the man who claims to have the blood of the beast, was killed by a radiant NPC with a generic weapon. It is the most anticlimactic death in the entire game. There is no final speech, no passing of the torch. You don't even get to see how he died. Did he slip? Did he get overwhelmed? Did he try to transform and get stuck in the animation? The game treats his death with the same narrative weight as finding a dead bandit in a random cave. Aela is there, kneeling over his body, furious and grieving. He truly has the spirit of the wolf, she says, or something equally dramatic. But all you can think is, he truly had the tactical awareness of a sweet roll. Let's break down the failure here. Skjor knew the Silver Hand possessed silver weapons. He knew they were specialised hunters, yet he rushed in alone, without backup, into a confined space. This isn't bravery, it's suicide. It suggests that the beast blood doesn't just make you smell bad, it actively makes you overconfident to the point of stupidity. It reinforces the idea that the Companions are high on their own supply. They believe their own legend so thoroughly that they think they are invincible, right up until a bandit with a two-handed sword proves them wrong. There is a fascinating, albeit glitchy aspect to Skjor's legacy that the community loves to discuss. In many playthroughs, Skjor doesn't stay dead. Due to a persistent bug in the game's code, Skjor will often respawn in Jorrvaskr, days or weeks after his death. You'll walk into the mead hall, and there he is, sitting at the table, calling you a whelp, as if nothing happened. Fans have spun this into a hilarious Ghost of Skjor theory. Some joke that he is actually a Daedra who can't be killed. Others suggest Hircine sent him back because he was too annoying for the hunting grounds. But the reality is a coding oversight that unintentionally highlights the shallowness of the character. The game world barely registers his absence because he was barely a character to begin with. His resurrection is met with zero fanfare. The other Companions don't gasp. Aela doesn't cry tears of joy. He just sits there, a ghost in the machine, proving that in Skyrim not even death can cure a bad script. But focusing on the intended narrative, Skjor's death creates a power vacuum that exposes the utter lack of leadership within the circle. With Kodlak gazing at the stars and Skjor dead on the floor, who is in charge? Aela. Her reaction to Skjor's death is not to reassess their strategy or question the wisdom of their war. Her reaction is pure, unadulterated vengeance. We must kill them all, she demands. This leads to a series of purgatory quests where you and Aela roam the land, wiping out Silverhand camps. It feels less like a strategic campaign and more like a grief-fueled rampage. Skjor's death serves no higher purpose than to trigger a revenge loop. He didn't die protecting a secret. He didn't die saving the Harbinger. He died because he underestimated a group of bandits he had been fighting for years. There is an obscure bit of dialogue you can catch if you listen closely to Aela and Skjor before his death. They speak in hushed tones about the older ones and how Kodlak doesn't understand. It implies a rift in the guild, a political struggle between the traditionalists and the pro-werewolf faction. Skjor was the leader of the radicals. His death should have ended that faction's influence. Instead, it radicalizes them further. But it's hard to take their revolution seriously when their Che Guevara figure got taken out by a mid-level dungeon boss. Skjor's equipment also tells a sad story. If you loot his body, and let's be honest, you probably did, waste not, want not, you find the wolf armor. It's decent, stylish, very on brand. But it's not unique. You can buy it from Jorland. He carried no unique journals, no map of the Silverhand network, nothing that indicated he was actually running an intelligence operation. He was just a guy with a sword and a bad plan. His death serves as the final nail in the coffin for the idea that the companions are master strategists. They are brawlers. They are barroom fighters who stumbled into a war they don't understand. Skjor's incompetence forces you, the player, to step up not because you are inspired by his sacrifice, but because you are the only person in the room with a functional frontal lobe. And as you stand over his corpse, watching Aela swear vengeance, you can't help but notice that the Silver Hand, the so-called villains of this story, actually seem to be the only ones with a coherent plan. They set a trap, or at least fortified a position. They used the right weapons for the job, and they successfully eliminated a high-value target. In a contest of competency, the Silver Hand is winning 1-0, but the narrative pushes you forward. You can't stop to say, hey Aela, maybe we should rethink this whole werewolf thing since it just got our second-in-command killed. No, you're swept up in the righteous anger of the Shield siblings. You're told that the Silverhand are monsters who must be destroyed, but are they? As we leave Skjor's cooling body on the cold stone floor of Gallows Rock, we have to ask a difficult question. A question that the companions desperately want you to ignore. Who exactly are the Silverhand? And are they actually the bad guys? Or are they just the Skyrim equivalent of animal control trying to deal with a very dangerous, very contagious pest problem? As the dust settles in Gallows Rock and you step over the bodies of the Silverhand to loot their chests, a nagging thought begins to scratch at the back of your mind. It's a thought the game desperately tries to suppress with dramatic music and Aela's righteous fury, but it's there nonetheless. You look at the bandits you just slaughtered, you look at their silver swords, their cure disease potions, and their leather armour dyed to look uniform. And you have to ask, are we the baddies? Welcome to the great moral inversion of the Companion's questline. The narrative frames the Silverhand as the antagonists. They are the enemies of the Shield brothers. They killed Skjor. They stole the shards of Wuuthrad. They are obstacles to be removed. But if you step out of the shoes of a werewolf sympathizer for just a moment and look at the situation from the perspective of literally anyone else in Skyrim, the Silverhand are the heroes. Let's look at the facts. The inner circle of the companions are werewolves, lycanthropes, monsters created by a Daedric prince. In the lore of the Elder Scrolls, werewolves are not misunderstood puppies. They are dangerous, infectious beasts that slaughter livestock and innocent people. They are scourges. If a pack of wolves was terrorizing Riverwood, the Jarl would put a bounty on them. The companions are that pack, hiding in plain sight behind the walls of Whiterun. The Silverhand, therefore, is not a criminal syndicate. They are a specialized order of monster hunters. Their crusade is entirely justified. They're doing the job that the vigilance of Stendarr claim to do, but with significantly more steel and significantly less preaching. They are the only thing standing between the unchecked spread of lycanthropy and the safety of the holds. When they capture a werewolf, they don't ransom it. They execute it, or imprison it, likely for interrogation or containment. This is public safety work. Consider their equipment. Every member of the Silver Hand carries a silver weapon. Silver is the only material that is truly effective against undead and lycanthropes. This isn't random loot, it's a tactical choice. They also frequently carry ingredients like hawk feathers and cure disease potions. Why? Because they know the risks of their trade. They are prepared to fight infection. These aren't highwaymen looking to steal your sweet roll. These are exterminators equipped for a very specific, very dangerous job. There is a prevailing fan theory that the Silver Hand might actually be a splinter group of the companions themselves, or at least founded by former members who discovered the dark secret and left in disgust. How else would they know so much about the inner workings of the guild? How did they know where the pieces of Wuuthrad were kept? How did they know to target Skjor and Aela? The fact that they possess shards of Ysgramor's axe suggests they believe they are the true inheritors of his legacy, the legacy of hunting elves and monsters, not becoming them. This theory gains weight when you look at the text Song of the Return, which details Ysgramor's hatred for anything that threatened humanity. It is highly probable that Ysgramor would have looked at the current circle, a group of Daedra-worshipping furries, and chopped their heads off without a second thought. The Silver Hand are, in a twisted way, arguably more loyal to the original spirit of the companions than the companions are. However, the game treats them with criminal negligence. Bethesda implemented the Silver Hand by essentially copy-pasting the bandit AI and asset pool. They shout generic taunts like, "You picked a bad time to get lost, friend," or "Never should have come here." They don't scream, "Die, beast," or "For the purity of humanity." They don't have a manifesto you can read. They don't have a charismatic leader who tries to reason with you, explaining that the companions are dangerous. They are mute targets. This dehumanization is intentional. If the Silver Hand were fleshed out, if you could talk to Krev the Skinner and hear him explain that his family was eaten by a werewolf, the player might hesitate. The moral ambiguity would become too heavy, so the game turns them into red bars on your compass. You're encouraged to kill them not because they are wrong, but because they are hostile. It is a cheap narrative trick to keep you on the rails of the heroic werewolf fantasy. But the environmental storytelling in their forts hints at a grim determination. You find cells containing captured werewolves, often labelled as savage werewolves, who have gone feral. This proves that the Silver Hand isn't just hunting the companions out of spite. They are dealing with the broader threat of feral lycanthropes roaming Skyrim. They're cleaning up the mess that Hircine's curse creates. When you release these captured werewolves, what do? They immediately attack you. They are mindless killing machines. The Silver Hand was right to lock them up. There is an obscure, cut content dialogue line, or perhaps just a very rare bark, where a Silver Hand member shouts, "Lay down your arms and submit to the cure." It's unsubstantiated in the final build, but it hints at a version of the questline where diplomacy or a cure arc was more central. Instead, we got a blood feud. The sheer volume of Silver Hand members you slaughter is staggering. By the end of the questline, you have personally wiped out hundreds of them. You have dismantled an entire organisation dedicated to fighting Daedric influence. You have likely made Skyrim significantly less safe for the average traveller. With the Silver Hand gone, who keeps the werewolf population in check? You, the Dragonborn who is busy collecting cheese wheels? Aela, who thinks being a werewolf is great? No one. You have removed the immune system of the province, allowing the infection to fester. And let's talk about the theft of the fragments. The companions act as if the Silver Hand stole the crown jewels. But if the Silver Hand are indeed traditionalists or former members, they likely view those fragments as being desecrated by the presence of the beast blood in Jorrvaskr. They are trying to rescue Ysgramor's axe from a guild that has lost its way. They are the custodians trying to save the museum from the arsonists. The locations they inhabit, Driftshade Refuge, Gallows Rock, Fort Fellhammer, are fortified positions. They aren't hiding in caves like common criminals. They have taken over military structures. This implies organisation, logistics and funding. Who funds the Silver Hand? Is it a Jarl? The Vigilance? A wealthy patron who lost a child to a werewolf? The game never explores this, but the infrastructure suggests they are a sanctioned, or at least tolerated, militia. Yet, you are the Dragonborn. You are the hero, and you storm into their base, murder their leader, strip their bodies of silver ore, which is great for transmuting into gold by the way, and burn their cores to the ground. You do this all at the behest of Aela, whose motivation is purely revenge for Skjor's tactical stupidity. The tragedy of the Silver Hand is that they are the protagonists of a different story. A survival horror story where a cult of skin changers has infiltrated the oldest city in the land, and a brave resistance is trying to stop them. But because you picked the Join Companions option in the menu, they are relegated to the role of cannon fodder. This culminates in the assault on Driftshade Refuge, the Silverhand's main base. You go there to retrieve the remaining fragments of Wuuthrad. You cut through them like wheat. When you finally kill their leadership and take the shards, you feel a sense of victory. But looking back at the empty fort, silence falling over the stone halls, it feels hollow. You haven't saved Skyrim from a threat. You've just eliminated the competition. It's a waste of a compelling antagonist. Imagine a quest line where you could choose to side with the Silver Hand. Imagine purging Jorrvaskr of the beast blood, restoring the honour of Ysgramor, and joining the ranks of the hunters. That would have been a moral choice. That would have been role-playing. Instead, we are locked into the perspective of the monsters, forced to believe that the people trying to cure the plague are the villains. As you wipe the blood of the Silver Hand from your blade, you look to Aela. She's grinning, her eyes wild with the thrill of the slaughter. She doesn't care about the morality of it. She doesn't care that you just wiped out the only group capable of policing her kind. She only cares that the blood is flowing. And this brings us to the driving force behind much of this destruction, and the next major disappointment in our dossier, Aela the Huntress, and her stubborn, short-sighted worship of a curse she calls a blessing. And so we arrive at the beating heart of the pro-lycanthropy faction within Jorrvaskr, the woman who likely convinced you that drinking blood from a stone basin was a sound career move, Aela the Huntress. If Kodlak Whitemane is the guild's conscience, struggling to steer the ship back toward honour, Aela is the one actively drilling holes in the hull because she thinks the water feels nice. To understand the tragedy of the companions, you have to understand Aela. On the surface, she is the poster child for the guild. She wears the ancient Nord armour, arguably the most iconic Skyrim armour set in the game, which visually links her to the Draugr-infested tombs of the First Era. She carries a shield that she claims belonged to her mother, and her mother's mother, tracing her lineage back to the women who fought alongside Ysgramor. She looks the part, she sounds the part, she's fierce, independent, and deadly. But Aela is also deeply, dangerously deluded. Her entire worldview is shaped by a survivorship bias that ignores the grim reality of her condition. She views the beastblood not as a curse to be endured, but as a blessing to be embraced. The blessing of Hircine, she calls it, with a reverence usually reserved for the divines. While Kodlak spends his twilight years searching for a way to wash his soul clean, Aela spends her prime mocking the very idea of a cure. She views the desire for humanity as weakness. To her, Kodlak isn't wise, he's just old and afraid. This friction drives the narrative of the guild, even if the game presents it subtly. When Skjor dies, Aela doesn't reflect on the dangers of their lifestyle. She doubles down, she radicalizes, she pulls you into her orbit, using you as the instrument of her vengeance against the Silver Hand, all while reinforcing the idea that the wolf is superior to the man. She's the bad influence friend who dares you to drive faster when the roads are icy. The most damning evidence of her short-sightedness comes later in the questline, when the opportunity for a cure finally presents itself. We will get to the mechanics of the cure shortly, but the philosophical stance Aela takes is fascinating. When Kodlak is finally freed, and his soul ascends to Sovngarde to conduct the ultimate afterlife audit, Vilkas and Farkas, the two brothers who have spent their lives in the shadow of the beast, both choose to be cured. They see the truth, they choose humanity, they choose Sovngarde. Aela refuses. "I like being a wolf," she effectively says. "I want to hunt forever." She consciously chooses the hunting grounds over Sovngarde. She chooses Hircine over Skjor. She chooses to be separated from her ancestors, from Kodlak, from Ysgramor himself, all for the sake of the adrenaline rush she gets when she chases a deer on four legs. It is a decision of profound spiritual abandonment. She is effectively excommunicating herself from Nord culture in exchange for a Daedric lease. There is a popular fan theory that posits Aela is actually being manipulated by Hircine more directly than the others. Hircine is known as the spirit of the hunt, but he is also a trickster. He lures mortals with the promise of power, only to enslave them. Aela's obsession with the Totems of Hircine, ancient artifacts she sends you to retrieve, suggests she is deepening her pact, unaware that she's digging her own grave. She believes she's mastering the beast, but the lore suggests that the more you commune with the prince, the more of you disappears. Consider the Totems of Hircine quests she offers after the main storyline. She sends you into damp caves to find rock carvings that grant new werewolf abilities. Like summoning spirit wolves or detecting life, she treats these objects like holy relics. Hircine has blessed us, she says. But look at what she is doing. She is turning the Companions, a guild founded to protect humanity, into a retrieval service for Daedric artifacts. She is filling Jorrvaskr with idols to a prince who views humans as prey. If Ysgramor were to walk in and see Aela praying to a totem of the father of manhunters, he would likely use Wuuthrad to dismantle the furniture. Her blindness extends to the history of the guild itself. Aela is proud of her lineage, yet she ignores the fact that the Beastblood is a relatively recent pollution of that lineage. The Pact was made by Terfig only a few centuries ago. For thousands of years, the Companions were glorious warriors without being furries. Aela conflates the two identities. She thinks you can't be a true companion without being a werewolf, which is historically false. She is rewriting history to justify her addiction to power. Core in-game facts reinforce this disconnect. If you ask Aela about the afterlife, she speaks of the hunting grounds as a great hunt. She envisions a paradise of endless prey. But we know from obscure texts like the Jagged Coast and developer commentary on Oblivion's realms that Hircine's realm is not a safari park where you are safe in the jeep. It is a realm of terror where the prey fights back, where the environment tries to kill you, and where you are eventually hunted down yourself. It is a place of stress, not rest. Aela is signing up for an eternity of cortisol spikes, mistaking it for glory. Furthermore, Aela's romance option, a favourite for many players due to her striking design, takes on a sinister tone when you consider the theological implications. If the Dragonborn marries Aela, they are marrying a woman who is destined for a different afterlife. Unless the Dragonborn also remains a werewolf, they will be separated for eternity. One goes to Sovngarde, the other to the hunting grounds. It is a tragic romance doomed to end at the moment of death. And if the Dragonborn does choose to stay a werewolf to be with her, she has effectively dragged the saviour of the world into a Daedric prince's collection. She is the siren luring, the hero onto the rocks. Her dialogue often hints at a lack of empathy for anything that isn't a predator. When you ask her about the Silver Hand, she dismisses them entirely. When you ask about the Cure, she's almost insulted. She lacks the introspection that makes a character truly complex. She is static. While Vilkas and Farkas grow, learn and change their minds, Aela ends the game exactly where she started, worshipping a demon and wanting to kill things. Even her combat AI reflects this recklessness. Aela is technically a thief-class archer in the game files, yet she often draws a dagger and charges into melee if the enemy gets close. She has no self-preservation instinct. She trusts the Beastblood to save her, much like Skjor did. And we saw how that worked out for him. The fact that she doesn't learn from Skjor's death, that she doesn't pause to think, maybe our powers have limits, is a testament to her zealous blindness. There is also a disturbing fan debate regarding the culling of the Silver Hand. Some argue that Aela used Skjor's death as an excuse to initiate a genocide against the Silver Hand, essentially using the Dragonborn as a weapon to wipe out the only threat to her lifestyle. It wasn't about justice, it was about removing the checks and balances. She didn't want to mourn Skjor, she wanted to secure her territory. It's a mob mentality. Take out the rival gang so we can run the streets. But perhaps the saddest part of Aela's story is her isolation. By the end of the questline, if you and the brothers cure yourselves, she is the last wolf in the circle. She is alone. The pack she valued so highly is gone. She's the sole keeper of a dark flame that everyone else has realised burns them. She wanders Jorrvaskr, offering training in archery, still praying to her totems, surrounded by shield brothers who have moved on. She becomes a relic of mistake, clinging to the fur and the claws because she has forgotten how to be just a human. The game frames her as cool, sexy and dangerous. But if you strip away the armour and the war paint, you see a fanatic who's been duped by a Daedric prince. She has traded her soul for a parlour trick. She's a warrior who has forgotten the war, focusing only on the weapon. And speaking of weapons, or rather the tools we use to fight our battles, we must turn our gaze to the man who allowed this rot to set in. The man who sat in the big chair, peeled his apples, and wrote sad diary entries while his guild fell apart. We need to talk about Kodlak Whitemane and the leadership vacuum that defined his tenure as Harbinger. We leave Aela polishing her shield and dreaming of eternal hunts, and we trudge up the few steps to the Harbinger's quarters. It's a modest room, filled with the scent of old paper and dried herbs. Here sits Kodlak Whitemane, the venerable leader of the Companions. He's the grandfather figure of the guild, soft-spoken, reflective, seemingly wise. He commands respect not through volume, like Skjor, but through presence. When you first meet him, you think, finally, an adult in the room. But as you delve deeper into the guild's dysfunction, and specifically into the pages of the journal he leaves behind, a different picture emerges. Kodlak isn't just a wise old man, he's a tragic figure of procrastination. He's a leader who identified a catastrophic problem within his organisation decades ago, and decided that the best course of action was to wait for a prophecy or a random adventurer to fix it for him. Kodlak's notebook is one of the most revealing items in the questline, yet many players skim it or ignore it entirely. If you read the entries, you see the mind of a man paralysed by regret. He writes openly about the rot in the guild. He acknowledges that the beastblood is a curse, a stain on the honour of Ysgramor. He knows that Hircine is waiting for him, and the thought terrifies him. He has nightmares of the hunting grounds, of being pulled away from Sovngarde by the jaws of a wolf. So what does he do about it? Does he convene the circle and demand they seek a cure? Does he send his best warriors to hunt down the witches of Glen Moril? Does he forbid the induction of new werewolves? No. He sits, he waits, he writes. For years, Kodlak has allowed Skjor and Aela to continue the cycle. He has watched them infect new members, including potentially you, without intervening. He is the CEO who knows the company is dumping toxic waste into the river, but doesn't want to upset the board members, so he just writes angry memos to himself. His leadership style is defined by passivity. He is a harbinger who refuses to harbour hard truths. There is a specific entry where he mentions Skjor and Aela's secret dealings. He knows they are up to something. He knows they are aggressive. Yet, he treats them like rebellious teenagers rather than dangerous cultists. They have the fire, he muses, excusing their bloodlust as youthful energy. This negligence leads directly to Skjor's death. If Kodlak had put his foot down, if he had reined in the Wolfpack faction, Skjor might still be alive. The Silver Hand might never have escalated. Kodlak's inaction is often defended by fans as adherence to the Companion's tradition of independence. The Harbinger is not a king. He is a respected advisor. He leads by example, not decree. But this is a cop-out. When the tradition involves selling souls to a Daedric prince, the leader has a moral obligation to intervene. By failing to do so, Kodlak becomes complicit. He is the good German of Jorrvaskr, watching the rise of extremism and doing nothing but wringing his hands. The game tries to frame his passivity as a form of mystic patience. He talks about his dreams, about the stranger, you, who will arrive to change things. But rely on a stranger? That's not leadership, that's gambling. He effectively bets the eternal souls of his entire guild on the chance that a random prisoner from Helgen might walk through the door and be good at fetching things. It's a strategy that relies entirely on plot armour. And let's look at the cure he eventually sends you to find. He knows the Glen Moril witches are the key. He has known this for a long time. Why didn't he send Vilkas or Farkas years ago? Why wait until he is on death's door? The timing suggests he only acted when his own mortality became undeniable. It wasn't about saving the guild, it was about saving himself before the clock ran out. It was a panic move disguised as a quest. There is also the matter of his relationship with the Silver Hand. Kodlak dismisses them as pests. But surely as a wise leader he must have recognised that their existence was a direct response to the Companion's curse. A true leader might have sought a truce, or at least understood the enemy. Instead, he allowed the conflict to fester until it exploded into an assault on Jorrvaskr itself. This brings us to the assault. While you're out fetching the cure, which we will discuss in all its gruesome detail next, the Silver Hand attacks Jorrvaskr. They manage to penetrate the city, storm the mead hall, and kill the Harbinger in his own room. This is a massive security failure. How did a band of werewolf hunters get past the Whiterun guards? How did they breach the legendary hall? Where were the other companions? The fact that Kodlak dies undefended in his quarters speaks volumes about the guild's actual readiness. They were caught napping, literally. The greatest warriors in Skyrim couldn't protect their own leader in their own home. It strips away the last veneer of their competency. Kodlak's death is tragic, yes, but it is also the result of his own complacency. He underestimated the threat he helped create. The fan community often debates whether Kodlak was truly wise or just tired. Wisdom implies action based on knowledge. Kodlak had the knowledge but lacked the action. He is a figure of potential, not kinetic energy. He represents the old guard of Skyrim, nostalgic, stubborn, and ultimately unable to cope with the changing world. He clings to the memory of Ysgramor while his house burns down around him. Even in death, he requires you to fix his mess. His spirit lingers, trapped. He can't move on until you perform the final ritual. He is the ultimate micromanager from beyond the grave, needing you to physically travel to Ysgramor's tomb to validate his parking ticket for the afterlife. It's a heavy burden to place on a new recruit who just wanted to learn how to use a shield. There is an obscure interaction if you use the Soul Tear shout from the Dawnguard DLC on Kodlak's corpse during the attack aftermath. You can, technically, reanimate him. He groans and fights for you. It's a macabre violation of his character, but it metaphorically fits. He was a man controlled by forces he couldn't handle, even in death. Kodlak's legacy is a warning label. He serves as a reminder that tradition is not always good, and that silence in the face of corruption is consent. He allowed the companions to become a hollow shell of their former glory, filled with beastmen and bullies, all because he didn't want to rock the boat until he saw the shore. And now, thanks to his last-minute panic, you are burdened with the most gruesome fetch quest in the entire game. Because to save Kodlak's soul, and potentially your own, you don't need a holy amulet or a divine blessing. You need a head. A severed, heavy, dripping head of a witch. And you don't just need one. If you want to be thorough, you need a bag full of them. So Kodlak Whitemane has given you his final order. He hasn't asked you to broker a peace treaty, or to retrieve a lost poem, or to find a rare flower that blooms only in moonlight. No, the wise, grandfatherly Harbinger has looked you in the eye and effectively said, I need you to go into a cave, murder a group of elderly women who look like birds, and bring me their severed heads in a sack. This is the Blood's Honour quest, and it represents the moment where the companion's questline veers sharply from heroic fantasy into slasher horror logistics. It is the Glenmoral Witchhead absurdity, a narrative beat that is as grotesque as it is mechanically annoying. You travel to the Glenmoral Coven. The location itself is perfectly atmospheric, a damp, fog-choked cavern in the Reach, hidden amongst the twisted roots of ancient trees. The air inside is thick with the smell of troll fat, burnt spriggan wood, and unwashed feathers. It is the sort of place where you instinctively check your disease-resistant stats. As you creep forward, you hear them. The Coven. Now, a note on the lore here. The Glenmoral Witches are not your standard potion-brewing hags. They are creatures of deep, old magic, with a history that stretches back to the Blood Moon expansion of the Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind. In Solstheim, they were instrumental in the lycanthropy cures of that era. They are the authorized technicians of Hircine's curse, but in Skyrim they appear as hagravens, monstrous hybrids of woman and bird, with talons for hands and feathers sprouting from their withered skin. They screech, they throw fireballs, and they move with a twitchy, unnatural speed that is genuinely unsettling. Your mission is simple. Kill them. All of them. The combat is frantic. Hagravens are glass cannons. They hit hard with destruction magic but crumble under a few good hits from a warhammer. You dodge a fireball, you swing your blade, and the witch falls. The cave goes silent, save for the dripping of water and the crackle of the remaining fire traps. Then comes the interaction prompt that defines the absurdity of this section. You hover your crosshair over the corpse. It doesn't say, loot gold. It doesn't say, take feathers. It says, take Glenmoral Witchhead. You press the button. There is a squelching sound effect, or at least your brain fills one in. You have just performed a field amputation. You have severed the head of a magical creature, and then you put it in your pocket. Let's pause and consider the physics of this. A human head weighs roughly 10 to 11 pounds. A hagraven head, with its beak, thick skull and feathers is likely similar or heavier. It is not a keychain. It is a bowling ball made of meat. And the quest doesn't just want one. If you are a savvy player who knows the endgame, or if you simply want to be thorough, you know you need to kill all 5 witches in the cave. Why 5? Because of the math of salvation. You need one for Kodlak. You might want one for yourself to cure your own lycanthropy later, and if you want to save Vilkas and Farkas from the hunting grounds in the post-game quests, you need one for each of them. That's 4 heads minimum. Most players take all 5 just to be safe, so you're now walking out of that cave carrying roughly 50 pounds of severed heads. Imagine the smell. Imagine the fluids leaking into your inventory, staining your immaculate Daedric armour, seeping into your sweet rolls and your spell tomes. The Dragonborn, the saviour of the world, is effectively a mobile charnel house. You're hiking back to Whiterun with a backpack that would get you arrested in any civilized jurisdiction in Tamriel. The game treats these heads as quest items initially. This brings us to a notorious mechanical frustration that fans have raged about for over a decade. Quest items in Skyrim have no weight. Technically, they don't count toward your encumbrance limit until the quest is resolved. However, once the quest is over, if you're still holding the extra heads, which you are because you haven't cured the brothers yet, they suddenly gain weight. 4 pounds each. You're permanently lugging around 20 pounds of rotting trophy until you find the specific prompt to use them. It is a hidden tax on your inventory space, a burden both spiritual and literal. There is a grim hilarity to the Dragonborn's arrival back in Whiterun. You walk through the city gates. The guards say, "Let me guess, someone stole your sweet roll?" You want to scream, "No, officer, but I do have 5 severed heads in my pants, would you like to see?" The dissonance between the horror of your inventory and the casual ambience of the city is peak Bethesda. You walk into the Bannered Mare to buy a drink, and you are the walking embodiment of a health code violation. But why heads? The lore implies a form of sympathetic magic. The head is the seat of the intellect and the spirit. By burning the head of the witch who cast the curse, or a member of her coven, you are symbolically destroying the source of the magic. It's a ritualistic severing of the tie to Hircine, but it's incredibly crude. In a world where restoration magic can regrow limbs and curing diseases involves praying at a shrine, the cure for lycanthropy requires a barbaric act of mutilation and incineration. It reinforces the primitive nature of the companion's struggle. They aren't solving this with high magic, they are solving it with fire and bone. There is a fan theory that suggests the Glenmoril witches wanted this to happen. Hircine loves the hunt. He loves struggle. By forcing the companions to hunt down the witches to cure themselves, Hircine is getting one last show. The witches are sacrificial pawns in the prince's game. They die so that the prey, Kodlak, can think he has escaped, while the act of killing them feeds Hircine's domain with violence. The heads are just tokens in a twisted, arcade game where the prize is your own soul. Furthermore, the quest design here is linear to a fault. There is no option to negotiate with the witches. You can't use your speech skill to convince them to lift the curse. You can't find a rare ingredient to brew an alternative potion. The only interaction verb available is kill. It reduces the Dragonborn to an executioner. It strips away agency. You're just cleaning up Kodlak's cold case files with a sharp axe. And let's talk about the visual of the heads themselves. If you drop one from your inventory, once they are no longer quest items, they use the standard Hagraven head model. Dead, milky eyes. Beak open in a silent scream. Feathers matted. It is a gruesome object to have rolling around the floor of your house in Breezeholm. Yet many players end up storing them in a chest next to their gems and dragon bones, forgetting about them until they need to cure Farkas 3 months later. "Honey, where did I put the witch heads?" is a legitimate question in the Dragonborn household. The return trip from the cave is where the narrative tension is supposed to peak. You have the cure, you have done the dirty work. You rush back to Jorrvaskr, expecting Kodlak to be waiting, perhaps sipping tea, ready to congratulate you. You picture the ritual, a solemn fire, the burning of the head, the old man smiling as the wolf spirit leaves him. You feel a sense of accomplishment. You endured the smell, the weight, and the horror for his sake. But the game pulls the rug out from under you. As you approach Whiterun, you see smoke. You arrive at Jorrvaskr to find chaos. The Silverhand has attacked, and Kodlak is dead. This renders the immediate fetch aspect of the quest tragicomically futile. You went to get the cure for a man who died while you were in the checkout line. You're standing there, holding a bag of severed heads, looking at his corpse. The item you fought for is now useless for its intended purpose, at least in the living world. The irony is thick enough to cut with a Skyforged sword. Kodlak waited too long, sent you away at the worst possible moment, and died before he could take the medicine. This twist serves to propel the story into its final act, but it also reinforces the theme of waste. The time you spent in that cave was time you weren't defending the hall. The act of seeking the cure left the patient vulnerable. It creates a feeling of guilt in the player. If you had been faster, if you hadn't stopped to loot that chest, could you have saved him? But ultimately, the Glenmoril Witchhead saga is a testament to the grim, messy reality of the companions. They don't deal in sparkling magical cures, they deal in meat. The cure for the beast blood is not a prayer, it is decapitation. It perfectly encapsulates the guild's identity crisis. They want to be noble knights, but their solutions are always those of the butcher. As you stand amidst the wreckage of the mead hall, the Silverhand attack having decimated the ranks, and by decimated we mean killed Kodlak and a few unnamed redshirts, you realise that the heads in your inventory are heavy in more ways than one. They are the weight of a failed leadership, a failed timeline, and a curse that refuses to die quietly. And now, with the Harbinger dead and the Silverhand in possession of the fragments of Wuuthrad, the remaining Circle members turn to you. They don't ask for the heads, not yet. They ask for revenge. They ask for the shards. They ask you to go on yet another retrieval mission. Because if there is one thing the companions love more than being werewolves, it is sending the Dragonborn to find broken pieces of pottery in a Draugr-infested hole. The smoke from Kodlak's funeral pyre has barely drifted into the grey Whiterun sky, joining the clouds above the throat of the world when the grinding gears of the quest machine lurch forward once again. You're standing there, perhaps feeling a genuine moment of sombre reflection for the old Harbinger when Aela approaches. Her eyes are dry, her jaw is set, and she has a request, or rather, a demand. The Silverhand stole the fragments of Wuuthrad, she tells you. We have to get them back. And just like that, the grief is shelved in favour of logistics. You're about to embark on the quest known as Purity of Revenge, which is a very grand title for what is essentially a janitorial errand to retrieve broken pieces of metal that you probably shouldn't have lost in the first place. This brings us to the 11th reason the Companions Guild wastes your time: the fetch quests for broken pottery. Because let's be honest, that is what Wuuthrad is at this stage of the narrative. It is a ceramic vase that someone dropped, and now you have to scour the floor to find the pieces so Yorland Greymane can glue it back together. The destination is almost always Driftshade Refuge. It is a remote fort located deep in the Winterhold snowy wastes, a place where the wind cuts through your armour and the visibility is roughly zero. It is one of those locations on the map that feels deliberately placed to annoy you. It's not near a convenient fast travel point unless you've been exploring diligently. It requires a trek, a long, cold trek. As you trudge through the snow, Aela running beside you, because for this quest she forces herself into your party as a mandatory follower, you have plenty of time to think about the absurdity of the situation. The Silverhand attacked Jorrvaskr. They killed the leader, and what did they take? Did they take the gold, the secret maps, the deed to the building? No. They took a handful of rusty metal shards that have been sitting in a display case for 500 years. Why? What is the Silverhand's plan for Wuuthrad? Are they going to reforge it? They are werewolf hunters. Wuuthrad is the weapon of Ysgramor, the original Nord hero. Lore-wise, the Silverhand should revere this object. Taking it makes them seem less like ideological villains and more like petty burglars who grabbed the shiny thing on the mantelpiece because they panicked. It reduces the arch-nemesis of the faction to the level of a bandit who steals a sweet roll. When you arrive at Driftshade Refuge, the experience is a familiar shade of beige. You have fought the Silverhand before, you have fought them in Dustman's Cairn, you have fought them in Gallows Rock. Now you fight them here. They use the same tactics, wear the same armour and shout the same lines. Die, dog, they scream, unaware that the repetition is the real torture. You sweep through the rooms, Aela unleashing arrows into anything that moves. You open a chest. There it is, a fragment of Wuuthrad. It looks like a piece of scrap metal you might find in a Dwemer scrapyard. You put it in your pocket. You move to the next room. Another fragment. It is a scavenger hunt in the most literal, tedious sense. This quest highlights the padding that plagues the companion storyline. The narrative arc is stalling. The writers needed a reason for you to kill the rest of the Silver Hand, so they created this theft plotline. It feels artificial. Instead of a climactic battle where you storm their base to stop a dark ritual or save a hostage, you are there to pick up the pieces of a weapon that, functionally, you don't even need yet. Let's talk about Wuuthrad itself for a moment. This is the legendary battle axe of Ysgramor. The text Songs of the Return describes it as a terrifying weapon, forged by Ysgramor's son, Ingol. Legend says that Ysgramor wept tears of pure ebony when Ingol died, and those tears were used to temper the blade. That is metal. That is hardcore lore. A weapon forged from the grief of a father and the darkness of the earth, designed to slaughter the snow elves who betrayed humanity. But in the game, it's a fetch quest item. It has no weight until you assemble it, and it sits in your inventory next to your cheese wheels and potions. The mystique is stripped away by the mechanics of objective updated retrieve fragment. It becomes a checkbox. Once you have wiped out Driftshade Refuge, an act which, by the way, effectively extincts the Silver Hand as an organisation, you return to Whiterun. You hand the shards to Yorland Greymane. Yorland, the best blacksmith in Skyrim, the man who grunts, "Gods be praised," with the enthusiasm of a man paying his taxes, takes the pieces. "I can fix this," he implies, and he does. In the span of time it takes you to walk to the Underforge, Yorland has reforged a legendary artifact that has been broken for millennia. There is no quest to find a special forge fire, no need to gather dragon blood to fuse the metal, he just hammers it. It makes the legendary nature of the weapon feel trivial. If it was that easy to fix, why didn't they do it years ago? Why was it sitting in a display case in pieces? Was Kodlak just too lazy to ask Yorland? "Hey Yorland, when you're done with those iron daggers, can you glue the Apocalypse Axe back together?" Fan discussions often point out the underwhelming stats of the Reforged Wuuthrad. When Orland hands it to you, it is a two-handed battle axe. It looks impressive. Dark, jagged, etched with Atmaran runes. It has a unique enchantment, especially deadly to elves. Now consider the context. You are playing Skyrim. Who are the primary enemies you face? Bandits, mostly Nords and Imperials. Draugr, dead Nords, dragons, animals. The number of elves you fight is relatively low, unless you are raiding a Thalmor embassy or exploring a Falmer cave. The Elf Slayer bonus is situational at best. Furthermore, Wuuthrad cannot be enchanted. You cannot put Soul Trap or Paralyze on it. For a high-level player with 100 enchanting, a standard Daedric battle axe with a custom dual enchantment, chaos damage plus absorb health, vastly outperforms Ysgramor's legendary weapon. The math doesn't support the myth. You have spent hours gathering the pieces of a weapon that is effectively a wall hanger. There is a niche community of players who defend Wuuthrad because it can be enchanted if you exploit a glitch involving the Elemental Fury Shout, or because its damage against Falmer is calculated separately, making it a Faermer Bane. But for the average player, it is a trophy. A heavy 25-pound trophy that takes up inventory space. The payout for this questline is essentially a cosmetic upgrade. You get the axe, but the real reward is supposed to be the progression of the story. Yet, the story feels like it is running in circles. You fetch the shard with Farkas, then you lost the shards, now you fetch them back with Aela. Is a narrative boomerang. And let's consider the honour of using Wuuthrad. This is a weapon of genocide. Ysgramor used it to drive the Snow Elves to near extinction. The Companions revere it as a holy symbol, but in the modern Fourth Era, where Dark Elves live in Windhelm, unhappily but still, and High Elves are diplomatic envoys, albeit spies, walking around with an axe that is magically racist is a bit awkward. It reinforces the backward-looking nature of the guild. They aren't fighting for the Skyrim of today, they're fighting for the Skyrim of the Merethic era. The fetching of the shards also highlights the lack of creativity in the Radiant quest system. The locations are reused, the enemies are reused, the item models are reused. It feels like filler content designed to stretch the playtime of the faction questline to meet a quota. Make them go to one more dungeon before the finale, the design document seems to say. As you stand in the Underforge, holding the freshly minted Wuuthrad, the other companions look at you with awe. Ysgramor's weapon returns, they cheer. You heft it. It swings slowly, it has no magical glow, it feels like a piece of iron. You look at it, then you look at your ebony blade or your dragonbone warhammer, and you politely stow Wuuthrad on your back, knowing it will likely never taste blood unless you run out of other options. But the axe is not just a weapon, it is a key. Jorlan tells you that you need it to open the final door. The door to Ysgramor's tomb, the final resting place of the original Harbinger, the place where Kodlak's soul can finally be cleansed. So the fetch quest was necessary, not for the loot, but for the lock. You have the key. You have the severed witch heads, which are still rotting in your pocket, by the way. You have the surviving members of the Circle. It is time for the grand finale. You expect a dungeon of epic proportions. You expect a challenge worthy of the 500. You expect the spirit of Ysgramor to test you. But as we'll see in the next section, the Tomb of Ysgramor is less of a glorious gauntlet and more of a linear hallway ride with some ghosts who are surprisingly easy to knock over. The tedium of the broken pottery is over. Now begins the disappointment of the linear tomb. The shards have been gathered, the glue has dried, and the legendary axe Wuuthrad is strapped to your back. The remaining Circle members, Vilkas, Farkas and Aela, stand ready. It is time for the final push. You are heading to Ysgramor's tomb, the holiest site in companion history, to scrub the stain of Hircine from Kodlak's soul. Anticipation runs high. Ysgramor is the George Washington, the King Arthur, and the Gilgamesh of Nord culture rolled into one. His tomb should be a labyrinth of impossible geometry, guarded by the spirits of the greatest Atmaran warriors who ever lived. You expect complex puzzles that test your knowledge of the Songs of the Return. You expect traps that require the agility of a saber cat. You expect a final boss that makes Alduin look like a cliff racer. Instead, you get a hallway. You arrive at the tomb, located in the desolate waste north of Winterhold. The entrance is impressive enough, a massive stone structure carved into the mountain. You approach the central statue of Ysgramor. He stands tall, empty-handed. The prompt appears, "Activate statue." You place Wuuthrad in his hands. The stone grinds and the doors open. It's a classic key in the lock mechanism, satisfying in a tactile way, but it essentially confirms that Wuuthrad's primary function in the game is to be a heavy, sharp door opener. Once inside, the disappointment settles in like dust. Ysgramor's tomb is not a grand necropolis, it is a linear dungeon. There is one path. You go forward, you cannot get lost. You cannot explore side chambers filled with lore, you just walk. It feels less like a tomb and more like a theme park ride where the cart is on rails. Please keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle as we approach the burial chamber. The enemies you face are companion ghosts. These are the spirits of the illustrious 500 or their descendants. They manifest as spectral warriors wielding ancient Nord weapons, and they are immediately hostile. "Turn back," they shout. "You are not worthy." Here is where the narrative dissonance kicks in again. You are the Harbinger designate. You have the axe. You are with the Circle. Why are the ancestors attacking you? Vilkas tries to explain it away. They are testing us. It's the standard video game excuse for why the good guys are shooting at you. But it feels hollow. These are the spirits of honourable warriors. Shouldn't they recognise the intent of your mission? Shouldn't they sense that you are here to save their leader? Instead, they function exactly like Draugr with a transparency filter. They run at you, you hit them, they dissolve into ectoplasm. There is no dialogue, no wisdom imparted. Imagine meeting the ghost of a legendary hero, and the only thing he says is "Hroo" before you power attack him into oblivion. It's a wasted opportunity for storytelling. We could have met Jeek of the River, or Ingle, well, he has his own barrow but still, or any named character from the lore. Instead, we get companion ghost. It's generic, it's budget-friendly, it's boring. Speaking of ease, let's discuss the difficulty. For a final faction dungeon, Ysgramor's tomb is shockingly easy. The ghosts are susceptible to all standard combat tactics. They don't have unique mechanics. They don't team up to use shield walls, a tactic famous in Nord history. They just swarm. If you are playing a stealth archer, you can clear the entire room before they even finish their unworthy bark. Fan theories abound regarding the hostility of the ghosts. One popular interpretation is that the ghosts aren't actually testing you, but are genuinely offended by the presence of the beast blood. Remember, you, Aela, Farkas and Vilkas are all technically werewolves or carriers when you enter. The spirits of the old companions who revered the purity of humanity might see you as abominations desecrating their resting place. They aren't sparring, they are trying to act as the immune system expelling a virus. It adds a layer of tragedy. You're fighting your own history because you have become something they hate. but the game never explicitly confirms this. It just lets you kill them and move on. As you progress, the circle thins out. Farkas gets scared of spiders, again, and decides to head back to the entrance to guard it. Vilkas, feeling the weight of his ancestors' judgment, also decides to stay behind. It's a convenient way for the game to remove the followers so the final confrontation is personal, but it makes the Shield brothers look a bit flaky. We're with you to the end, unless there are spiders, or ghosts, then you go ahead. You trudge on, likely with Aela, who never misses a chance to kill something, until you reach the central chamber. There, amidst the blue flame of the eternal fire, stands the ghost of Kodlak Whitemane. He's warming his hands by the fire, looking for all the world like he's just camping. He greets you warmly. He doesn't seem to mind that you just slaughtered 50 of his predecessors to get here. The conversation is brief. "You have the heads?" he asks. "Yes," you say, trying to ignore the smell coming from your backpack. You throw a Glenmorill witch head into the fire. The magic flares. A red spirit wolf tears itself out of Kodlak's spectral chest. This is the wolf spirit, the manifestation of Hircine's curse. And this brings us to the boss fight. The wolf spirit is a wolf. It's red. It glows. It bites. That's it. It doesn't have a second phase. It doesn't summon minions. It doesn't fly. It is a standard wolf enemy with a slightly larger health bar and a glow effect. You hit it 3 times, it dies. The climax of the entire Companion's questline, the struggle between Hircine and the Nord spirit, the battle for the soul of the Harbinger, is resolved in about 10 seconds of melee combat. It is underwhelming in the extreme. You expect Hircine himself to laugh from the void. You expect a trial of will. Instead, you play whack-a-dog. Once the wolf is dead, Kodlak is free. He thanks you. "The rot is gone," he says. He names you the new Harbinger. "Lead them well," he says, before fading away to ascend to Sovngarde. It's a nice moment, sure, but it feels unearned. You didn't outsmart a Daedric prince. You just threw a head in a fire and killed a glowing dog. After Kodlak leaves, you are left standing in the tomb. You can choose to cure yourself here, throwing another head in the fire and fighting your own inner wolf, or cure the others. But the room feels empty. The grand finale is over, and there is no treasure chest raining gold from the ceiling. However, there is one piece of loot that counts as an obscure lore victory, though many players miss it. If you explore the tomb thoroughly, you can find the Shield of Ysgramor in a chest. This is a heavy armor shield with a unique enchantment, plus 20% magic resistance and plunderous 20 health. Lore-wise, this is the shield that blocked elven arrows during the return. Mechanically, it's okay. It's a decent shield, but by the time you finish this questline, you likely have something better. The fact that Ysgramor's legendary shield is just sitting in a wooden chest, rather than being displayed on a pedestal or held by his ghost, feels like an afterthought. And what about Ysgramor himself? You never see him. You're in his tomb. You're using his axe. You're saving his successor. But the man himself is absent. His sarcophagus is the centerpiece of the room, but it remains silent. Compare this to the Thieves' Guild questline, where you meet the patron Daedra Nocturnal, or the College of Winterhold, where you interact with the Psijic Order. The Companion's questline lacks that connection to the higher powers of the universe. It feels small, domestic. The exit from the tomb is equally linear. You walk up a staircase and push open a chain door that leads you back to the snowy cliffs outside. You step out into the cold air, blinking in the sunlight. You're the Harbinger now. You have the axe, which you can grab back from the statue, by the way. Don't leave it there. You have the title. But looking back at the looming stone face of the tomb, you can't help but feel a sense of, is that it? You conquered the resting place of the 500, and all you got was a title that grants you no political power and a shield you'll probably sell to Belethor. The linearity of the tomb reflects the linearity of the Companion's ideology. They see a straight path, strength, honour, glory. They don't handle curves, nuances, or magic well. The tomb is a physical manifestation of their simple, brute force worldview. It doesn't challenge the mind, it only asks for a strong arm. And for a Dragonborn who has trapped dragons in grand palaces and navigated the metaphysical realm of the soul cairn, walking down a hallway to kill a ghost dog feels like a step backward. But the disappointment doesn't end with the dungeon. Now that you are the Harbinger, you might expect the gameplay to change. You might expect to command troops, set policies, or lead raids. You might expect the world to treat you differently. Spoiler alert, they don't. You step out of Ysgramor's tomb, the cold wind of the Sea of Ghosts biting at your face, but you don't feel it. You are warm with the glow of victory. You have cleansed the soul of Kodlak Whitemane. You have united the fragments of Wuuthrad. You have defeated the wolf spirit. You're no longer just a whelp. You are the Harbinger, the leader of the companions, the successor to Ysgramor himself. You fast travel back to Whiterun, expecting a reception. Perhaps a feast in your honour? A modification to the guard dialogue where they salute you instead of asking about your sweet roll? You push open the doors to Jorrvaskr, ready to address your subjects, to set a new course for this ancient order, to perhaps finally institute a no fighting in the dining hall policy. And nothing happens. Torvar is still drunk. Athis is still sitting on the floor. Judda Stonearm still sneers at you, saying, "What is it? I can't spend all day talking." The disconnect is instantaneous and jarring. You have ascended to the highest rank in the faction, the absolute pinnacle of Nord warrior culture, and to the game engine, you are still just the guy who fixes problems. This brings us to the 13th and perhaps most insulting reason the Companions Guild is a waste of time. Harbinger in name, errand boy in practice. The title promises authority, command and respect. The gameplay delivers more of the same monotonous servitude you've been enduring since level 1. The core mechanic of the post-questline companions is arguably the worst implementation of leadership in Skyrim. In a logical world, the Harbinger would assign tasks. You would walk up to Farkas and say, "Farkas, go clear out Valtheim Towers." You would tell Aela, "Go hunt some deer for the larder." You would sit in Kodlak's chair, manage the guild's finances, and perhaps recruit new members to rebuild the ranks depleted by the Silverhand War. Instead, the dynamic is completely inverted. To engage with the guild, you have to walk up to your own subordinates and ask, "I'm looking for work." Let that sink in. The CEO walks into the mailroom and asks the intern, "Is there anything you need me to do?" Aela will look at you, the Slayer of Alduin, the Thane of Whiterun, the Harbinger of the Companions, and say, "There is a bear causing trouble in Ivarstead. Go kill it." And you go. You, the demigod, trudge off to kill a bear because your lieutenant told you to. It humbles the Dragonborn in a way that breaks immersion completely. You aren't leading the Companions. You are their freelance problem solver who just happens to have a fancy title. Lore-wise, the game attempts to cover this with a semantic shield. The term Harbinger is historically described not as a commander, but as a respected advisor, a first among equals. The text Great Harbingers explains that the Harbingers do not give orders. They guide by example. They are the rudder, not the captain. It's a convenient excuse for Bethesda, not to program a management sim into the game, but it falls flat when you consider the reality of the world. Ysgramor didn't just advise the 500, he led them, he commanded the ship. The idea that the Harbinger has zero operational authority is a modern dilution of the role that makes the title feel impotent. Fans have long debated this illusion of power across all Skyrim factions. You become the Archmage, but you still fetch books for Urag. You become the Listener, but you still take contracts from Nazir. But the Companions feels particularly egregious because the guild is built on hierarchy and strength. If you are the strongest, why are you taking orders from the weak? Financially, being the Harbinger is a bust. The Thieves Guild Master gets a tribute chest that fills with gold and gems. The Dark Brotherhood Listener gets 20,000 gold to renovate a sanctuary and a recurring assassination loop that pays well. The Harbinger gets Kodlak's room. Let's tour your new estate. It is a small bedroom in the basement. It has a bed, a table, and a display case. It contains some dried frost Miriam and a few apples. That's it. You don't get a cut of the guild's earnings. You don't get a weekly stipend from the Jarl for keeping the peace. You don't even get free mead. You still have to pick it up off the tables like a scavenger. From an economic standpoint, the promotion comes with zero benefits package. And what of the Radiant quests available to the Harbinger? Surely they unlock high-level leader-tier missions. No, you're still stuck in the same loop. Animal extermination, hired muscle, rescue mission. You're arguably the most overqualified pest control expert in Tamriel. Imagine General Tullius being asked to go unclog a drain in solitude. That is your life now. There is a particularly frustrating aspect to the post-game content involving the purity quests. Vilkas and Farkas eventually decide they want to be cured too. They come to you, their leader, for help. This should be a moment of leadership. you guiding them to salvation, but mechanically it's just another escort quest. You have to drag them back to Ysgramor's tomb one by one, fight the wolf spirit again, and cure them. It's repetitive, it's tedious, and it reinforces the idea that they can't do anything without you holding their hand. Even worse, these quests are notoriously buggy. Sometimes Vilkas won't offer the quest, sometimes Farkas disappears. You, the Harbinger, spend more time fighting the quest log than fighting enemies. The Purity arc feels like unfinished business that Kodlak left on your desk, a stack of paperwork he didn't want to file. And let's look at the state of the guild itself. You have restored the honour of the companions, theoretically. But visually, Jorrvaskr remains a mess. The chairs are overturned from the silver hand attack, unless you wait for the cell to reset, and even then it looks dingy. The roof is still just an upside-down boat. You can't commission repairs, you can't upgrade the Skyforge, you can't order Jorlund to make you a custom suit of Harbinger armour. The world remains static. You have climbed to the top of the mountain, only to find that the view is exactly the same as it was from the bottom. There is a fan theory that the Dragonborn's tenure as Harbinger is destined to be short and disastrous. Why? Because the Dragonborn is rarely there. You're off saving the world, fighting Miraak, or building a house in Falkreath. The companions effectively run themselves while you're gone. This suggests that the title of Harbinger is purely ceremonial in the Fourth Era. You are a mascot. You're the celebrity face they put on the brochure to attract new recruits. Join the guild led by the Dragonborn, while Aela and Vilkas do the actual management. It's a cynical take, but it fits the gameplay loop perfectly. Consider the Dragon Seeker's quest. Occasionally Vilkas or Farkas will ask you to help them kill a dragon. I've always wanted to see a dragon up close, they say. Finally, a quest worthy of the Harbinger. You go, you kill the dragon. They say, wow, thanks, and walk away. They don't take the dragon bones, they don't craft armour. They don't learn a shout, they just wanted a field trip. You are the chaperone taking the kids to the zoo. The lack of recruitment is another missed opportunity. Skyrim introduces the Blades recruitment mechanic, where you can bring followers to Delphine to rebuild the Order. Why can't the Harbinger do this? Imagine recruiting Eric the Slayer or Mjol the Lioness into the Companions. Imagine seeing them wearing wolf armour, training in the courtyard. It would give you a sense of ownership, of building a legacy. Instead, the roster is frozen. When Skjor dies, he isn't replaced, unless he glitches back to life. The guild is shrinking, and you have no power to grow it. Even the guards' dialogue doesn't shift enough to make you feel important. They still say, I've heard you've been proving yourself to the companions, long after you have become the Harbinger. The fame system lags behind your achievements, leaving you in a perpetual state of promising rookie in the eyes of the public. The ultimate insult, however, comes from the fact that you can effectively abandon the guild the moment you get the title, and nothing changes. There are no consequences for absenteeism. The companions don't send a courier saying, "Boss, we need you." They just sit there, drinking and fighting, frozen in time. It proves that your presence was never required for the guild's survival. You were just the catalyst for a specific series of script triggers. So, you sit in Kodlak's room, eating a stolen apple, looking at the journal of the man who died to give you this job. You realise that you have inherited a title with no power, a room with no view, and a group of subordinates who treat you like a TaskRabbit. You are the Harbinger of nothing. But surely there must be some perk to sticking around. Some high-level reward that justifies the grind? Well, Aela has one more set of tasks for you. She wants you to find the Totems of Hircine, ancient artifacts that promise to buff your werewolf form. It sounds promising, a way to finally make the beast blood viable in the endgame. But as we are about to discover, chasing these totems is a lesson in diminishing returns. You are the Harbinger. You have the axe, the title, and the keys to the basement bedroom. You might think that your service to the beast blood is over, that you can perhaps settle into a life of quiet administrative duties and occasional bandit raids. But Aela the Huntress is not done with you. She's lurking in the main hall, leaning against a pillar, watching you with that intent predatory gaze. If you make the mistake of speaking to her, she offers you the final tier of the companion's busywork, the Totems of Hircine. This brings us to the 14th reason the guild wastes your time, the utter uselessness of the werewolf totems. These are presented as the endgame artifacts for the lycanthrope playstyle, ancient relics that will unlock the true potential of the beast. In reality, they are glorified paperweights that grant you abilities you likely already have in a better form, or abilities that are actively detrimental to the flow of combat. The quest loop is, by now, painfully familiar. Aela tells you she has located a Totem of Hircine. Where is it? It's in a radiant dungeon. It could be a cave you cleared 3 hours ago. It could be a bandit camp on the other side of the map. You go, you fight through the same enemies you've been fighting for 80 hours, and you find the object. The totem itself is a drum-shaped stone carving. It looks primitive, ancient, and arguably quite cool from an art design perspective. You lug it back to the Underforge and place it on a specific pedestal. Now, you can pray to it to change your werewolf shout ability. Note the phrasing, pray. You, the hero who just helped Kodlak escape Hircine's clutches, are now kneeling before an idol of Hircine to ask for superpowers. The narrative dissonance is deafening. You're effectively undoing the moral victory of the previous section, doubling down on the curse just because Aela thinks it's neat. Let's break down the powers these totems grant you and why they are functionally worthless for a high-level Dragonborn. First, there is the Totem of Fear. This is the default ability, but the totem enhances it. You roar, and enemies run away. On paper, this sounds like a great crowd control mechanic. I am a terrifying monster. Hear me roar! In practice, it is the most annoying mechanic in the game. Skyrim is a game about killing things to get their loot. When you use the Totem of Fear, your loot runs away from you. You find yourself in a ridiculous Benny Hill chase sequence, sprinting after a terrified bandit who is fleeing into the sunset. You are a werewolf. You want to maul, not play tag. Chasing down enemies wastes the precious time of your transformation duration. By the time you catch the bandit, you've reverted to human form and are standing naked in a field, miles from the dungeon entrance. It turns combat into a cardio session. Next is the Totem of the Hunt. This grants you a detect life ability while in beast form. You roar, and you can see the glowing auras of living things through walls. Useful? Theoretically. But consider the competition. The Dragonborn has access to the Aura Whisper Shout, which does the exact same thing, lasts longer, and doesn't require you to turn into a dog. There are also spells and potions that achieve this effect. Furthermore, the visual effect of the Totem of the Hunt is often critiqued for being murky. The grayscale werewolf vision combined with the glowing auras can make navigation a headache in dark dungeons. And again, do you really need to see the bandits through the wall? You're a werewolf. Your strategy is run in and hit buttons, not carefully plan a tactical breach. It adds a layer of information that the playstyle doesn't really utilize effectively. Finally, we have the Totem of Brotherhood. This is arguably the best one. You roar and you summon 2 spirit wolves to fight by your side. The pack is with me, you think. But then you look at the wolves. These are not the mighty timber wolves of the wild. These are often spectral versions of the basic red wolf. Their health pools are laughable at high levels. If you're playing on Master or Legendary difficulty, your spirit pack serves less as a combat force and more as a brief distraction. A Draugr Deathlord will one-shot your summoned wolves, leaving you alone again in seconds. Or worse, the AI pathing will cause the spirit wolves to block a doorway, trapping you in a room with a fire trap. They are flimsy, fleeting, and frankly embarrassing for a Harbinger to rely on. "Behold my power," you shout, summoning 2 dogs that immediately die. Lore-wise, these totems represent a deep dive into Atmaran animism. The book The Totems of Hircine, which you rarely see but informs the lore, suggests that these artifacts date back to a time when Nord worship was more primal, before the pantheon of the divines was fully codified. They represent the old ways. By using them, you're essentially engaging in archaeological regression, embracing a primitive superstition that your culture moved away from for a reason. There is a fan theory that the totems are actually anchors designed by Hircine to ensure the companions never truly escape him. Even if a companion seeks a cure, the presence of these totems in the Underforge acts as a spiritual tether, keeping the guild within the prince's sphere of influence. By recovering them, you're unwittingly fortifying Hircine's claim on Jorrvaskr. You think you're buffing your stats, you're actually reinforcing the prison bars. The introduction of the Dawnguard DLC added a perk tree for werewolves, which was Bethesda's attempt to make the form viable. You can feed on hearts to gain perks. Some of these perks interact with the totems. For example, the Totem of the Moon, perk allows you to summon ice wolves instead of regular wolves with the Brotherhood totem. Does this fix the problem? Not really. Ice wolves are tougher, yes, but they still pale in comparison to the summons available to a Conjuration Mage. A Dremora Lord or a Storm Atronach will vastly outdamage and out-tank your Spirit Wolves. And to get these perks, you have to engage in a grind that involves eating hundreds of corpses. It is a gruesome, repetitive time sink that turns the noble warrior into a scavenger. The scaling issue is the final nail in the coffin. The werewolf form does not benefit from your armor rating or your weapon enchantments. You rely on the mage armor rating provided by the perks, which caps out at a level that is insufficient for endgame content. On legendary difficulty, a werewolf is a glass cannon without the cannon. You take massive damage. You have no way to heal quickly without feeding, which leaves you vulnerable. The totems do nothing to mitigate this survivability issue. So you spend hours finding these rocks. You bring them back. You listen to Aela prattle on about the glory of the hunt, and what do you have to show for it? A roar that makes enemies annoying to kill, a vision mode that gives you a headache, and 2 dead spirit dogs. The uselessness of the totems highlights the broader issue with the werewolf mechanic in Skyrim. It is a novelty, not a viable lifestyle. It is fun to rampage through a bandit fort once or twice, but as a primary way of interacting with the world, it is restrictive and mechanically shallow. The totems try to add depth, but they only add width, more options that are equally ineffective. And let's not forget the ritual aspect. Every time you want to switch totems, you have to physically go to the Underforge and pray. You can't swap them on the fly. You can't have all 3 active at once. You have to commute to your basement shrine to change your loadout. It adds friction to the gameplay that discourages experimentation. Most players pick one, usually Brotherhood just for the decoys, and never touch the others again. The existence of the totems also makes Aela's character even more tragic. She's obsessed with these things. She treats them as the holy grail of her faith. But they are hollow. They promise dominion over the beast, but they offer only parlour tricks. She is chasing a phantom of power, dragging you along with her, while the true strength of the Dragonborn, the voice, the craft, the strategy, is ignored. As you stand in the Underforge, looking at the 3 stone drums, you realise that you have turned the secret heart of the companions into a museum of bad game design. You have filled the room with clutter that serves no purpose other than to remind you of the curse you are supposed to be wary of. The quest for the totems is the final whimpering note of the companions' gameplay loop. It is the developers saying, "We have nothing left for you, but here are some collectibles to keep you busy." It is busy work disguised as lore. And so, having exhausted the quests, collected the shards, cured the ghost, and found the magic rocks, you are left with the total sum of your experience with the companions. You step out of the Underforge one last time, look up at the sky frame of the Jorrvaskr roof, and you have to ask, was any of this worth it? We have journeyed through the incompetence, the hypocrisy, the bad smells, and the tedious fetch quests. Now, in our final section, we will zoom out. We will look at the stark contrast between the legend of Ysgramor, the genocidal, terrifying, ocean-striding warlord, and the current occupants of his hall. We will conclude our dossier by realising that the modern companions are not just a waste of time. They're a pale, drunken shadow of a history they don't even understand. And so, we arrive at the end of our saga. We have dissected the hypocrisy, the bad hygiene, the tactical incompetence, and the relentless fetch quests. But to truly understand the magnitude of the disappointment that is the companions, we must look backward. We must cast our gaze across the sea of ghosts, back to the frozen continent of Atmora, and measure the current occupants of Jorrvaskr against the shadows they claim to represent. We are comparing genocidal warlords to mead hall drunks. The legend of Ysgramor is the foundational myth of Skyrim. According to the Songs of the Return, that multi-volume epic you see gathering dust on bookshelves throughout the game, Ysgramor was a figure of terrifying elemental power. After the Night of Tears, where the Snow Elves sacked the human city of Sarthal, Ysgramor didn't just file a complaint with the Jarl. He returned to Atmora, gathered 500 of the deadliest warriors humanity had ever produced, and sailed back to commit a counter-genocide so thorough it reshaped the demographics of the continent for 4,000 years. These were not adventurers, they were conquerors, they were giants among men. The lore describes them performing feats of absurd strength, clearing forests with a single swing, shouting rivers into submission, and slaughtering elves by the thousands. They were the apex predators of the Merethic era. They built Whiterun simply by flipping their boat over because they were tired of carrying it. That is the scale of ambition we are talking about. They were world builders and civilization enders. Now, look at Torvar. Torvar is a member of the Companions. You can usually find him sitting at a bench in Jorrvaskr nursing a mug of ale. His defining character trait is that he likes to get drunk. If you ask him about his skills, he mutters about how magic is for the weak and how he prefers a good hammer. He's not a conqueror. He's not a hero. He's a barfly with a sword. If Ysgramor walked into the hall today and saw Torvar passing out in his soup, he would likely mistake him for a goblin and cleave him in two. This is the final crushing realization. The Companions are not the spiritual successors to the 500. They are a cosplayer club that has forgotten the script. They wear the armour, they use the names, but they lack the fire. The honour they speak of has degraded from establishing a kingdom for humanity to beating up Mikael the Bard because he wrote a rude song about a vegetable. The modern Companions have no ambition. They are content to sit in their upturned boat, living off the interest of a reputation earned 5 millennia ago. They don't expand their territory. They don't defend the borders of Skyrim against the Thalmor, who are ironically the spiritual successors to the elves Ysgramor fought. They don't even really run the city of Whiterun. They just squat in its nicest district. They are stagnant. There is a fascinating fan debate regarding the degeneration of the Nords in general, with the Companions serving as the prime example. Some lore scholars argue that this is a deliberate thematic choice by Bethesda. The Fourth Era is a time of decline. The Empire is crumbling, the dragons are returning to eat the world, and the great heroes are gone. The Companions represent the hollow shell of tradition. They cling to the rituals, the tilting of the mead, the shield-sibling oaths, but they have lost the substance. They're a commentary on how societies decay when they stop looking forward and only look back. Consider the circle itself. In Ysgramor's day, the captains of the ships were leaders of armies. Jeek of the River founded the City of Solitude. The original Companions founded the holds of Skyrim. They were political and military architects. The current circle, Skjor, Aela, Farkas, Vilkas. What have they built? A secret club in the basement where they turn into dogs. They haven't founded cities. They've founded a furry convention. Their great secret is insular and selfish. It doesn't benefit Skyrim. It only benefits their own adrenaline addiction. The introduction of the Beastblood can be seen as the ultimate symptom of this decline. Ysgramor didn't need to turn into a wolf to kill elves. He used steel, shout, and rage. He relied on his own humanity, amplified to mythic proportions. The modern Companions, feeling their own inadequacy, reached for a shortcut. They made a deal with the devil, or Hircine, to gain power because they no longer believed in their own strength. They traded the purity of the Atmaran spirit for the dirty, borrowed power of a Daedra. It is an admission of weakness. And then there is the Dragonborn, you, the player. By the time you finish the quest line, you're effectively a god walking among mortals. You have killed Alduin, the World Eater. You have mastered the voice. You're likely the Archmage, the Listener, and the Guildmaster of the Thieves. You stand in Jorrvaskr, wearing armour made of dragon bones, holding a weapon that traps souls, and Jarda Stonearm still treats you like a pledge. The game fails to recognise that you have far surpassed the legacy of the Companions. You're not just their harbinger, you're a being that Ysgramor would have treated as an equal, or perhaps even feared. Yet the guild structure forces you to act as a peer to people like Rhea, who is excited about killing her first bear. It feels patronising. You're a shark swimming in a tank of goldfish who think they are the kings of the ocean. The radiant nature of the guild's existence seals its fate as a waste of time. Because the quests are infinite and randomly generated, there is no final victory. In Ysgramor's time, there was an end goal: conquer Skyrim. They achieved it. For the modern Companions, the goal is keep the lights on. There is no grand campaign. You will rescue kidnapped citizens forever. You will kill escaped criminals forever. You are running on a treadmill of mediocrity. Core in-game dialogue reinforces this lack of vision. Listen to the conversations in the hall. They talk about old battles, about who is sleeping with whom, about the quality of the smithing. They rarely talk about the future. They are trapped in a loop of nostalgia. The good old days, they sigh, ignoring the fact that they have the power to make today a good day If they got off their benches and did something about the Civil War or the Vampire Menace, even the architecture tells the story of stagnation. Jorrvaskr is the oldest building in Whiterun, yes, but it hasn't changed. It hasn't grown. It is a wooden fossil. The Skyforge is ancient and powerful, yet Yorland Greymane mostly uses it to make steel swords for the guards. The potential of the place is squandered. Ultimately, the Companions Guild is a waste of time because it sells you a fantasy it cannot deliver. It promises the glory of the Nord warrior kings, the thunder of the voice, and the camaraderie of a shield wall. Instead, it gives you a werewolf curse that ruins your sleep, a title that grants no authority, and a group of friends who are more interested in their own drama than in the fate of the world. You join expecting to become a legend. You leave realizing that the true legend was the one you forged yourself, despite the guild, not because of it. You leave Jorrvaskr not with a sense of belonging, but with a sense of relief that you don't have to babysit Farkas anymore. You walk out the doors, look down at the city of Whiterun, and realize that the honourable companions are just a footnote in the story of the Dragonborn, a brief, furry detour on the road to true greatness. The fire in the centre of the mead hall has burned down to glowing embers, casting long, dancing shadows against the curved wooden ribs of the roof. The shouting matches have faded, the tankards have been drained, and the heavy oak doors are bolted shut against the chill of the Skyrim night. The tales of Ysgramor and his 500 have drifted into the silence, leaving only the soft crackle of the wood and the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping warriors. It's time for us to rest, too. We've travelled a long road tonight, from the fistfights of the initiation to the haunted corridors of Ysgramor's tomb. We've carried the heavy burdens of leadership, questioned the wisdom of the ancients, and perhaps, just perhaps, found a moment of peace amidst the chaos of the hunt. Let the frustrations of the radiant quests fade away. Let the memory of the wet dog smell dissipate into the crisp, clean air of the tundra. You don't need to fetch any more shields tonight. You don't need to intimidate any more shopkeepers. The quest log is empty. The map is folded away. Imagine yourself sitting there, by the Skyforge, under the vast star-filled canvas of the northern sky. The moons, Massa and Secunda, are watching over you, their silver light bathing the plains in a gentle glow. The wind whispers through the gilder-green tree, a soft, rustling lullaby that speaks of ancient roots and deep, restful earth. You are safe here. The dragons are sleeping in their mountains. The bandits are quiet in their forts. The world is pausing, taking a deep breath, and inviting you to do the same. Close your eyes. Let the weight of your armour fall away. Let your breathing slow to the rhythm of the night. The story is done. The journey is complete.